Yeah, I mean, do you want me to walk you through the flow charts again? I mean, they haven't really changed other than the way I laid them out and stuff like that. We could go through the data points because the team is going to have to come up with some decisions and flush out some of that. So I could kind of walk you through that document. I think that's kind of where we are.
Yeah, let's do that, John. That's great. Let me make you host.
And you guys did like look at the most recent profile flows, right? The diagrams.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
So like what I tried to do was, if you print both of them and you hold them up and you look through them, like this beginning section here, like is lined up. It's the same in both of them. So it kind of shows you that once you get to this point here, you're looking at the other PDF. That was the big thing. And then ultimately, you can kind of put them one on top of the other, and the orientation is the same, that you come through in this direction. So visually, you can kind of see and compare your different paths, the different user experiences and that kind of thing.
Okay, that was really good, John.
Yeah.
Ultimately, that'll flush out as we add additional questions. What I imagine, whether we do it in a diagram or not, but eventually when we do one of these paths, you'll be able to create the user journey with all of the questions, and that would turn into each of the wireframes that they build and the different screens they build. And one of the things to always kind of keep in mind, and this goes back to the point I made in our last call, was some of the profile things that were created by Daynia and Leslie were asking some of the same questions, like what sport and at what level do you play?
Right.
But they asked them at different points in time. Like sometimes it was the third question, other times it was the first. And I think that we can, once we start looking at these data points, you'll see the hierarchy. But I believe that the hierarchy is kind of like the role, the sport, and the level that you play at. Like those are the top three things. After that, it becomes, the team, the league, the division that you might be in, that the skill level of a player. Like in youth sports, there was beginner, intermediate, advanced, something like that. So that's kind of where we are. And that's how I think the flows, the diagrams for the user journeys will be used ultimately by the developers to understand the sequence of how they're building these paths through the profile. Let me share my screen. Hang on.
Hey, Bill.
Good to know everybody.
Hi, Bill.
Hey, Bill. All right, let me know when that pops up on your screen.
Got it.
I see it.
Yep.
So this guy, only built this really for the primary or more common data points that you find in most of the profiles. Ultimately, we kind of have to, every single question that we ask, every single statistic that we ask, we will have to basically do the same thing for this. So this becomes a large effort. And if we don't do it, the developers will make the decision and determine, for us, whether they think it should be required. Now, when we look at different profile elements, most of them are going to end up being not the profile elements, but the recruiting elements, like the statistics. Like most, if not all of them, are going to be optional. You're never going to require someone to put it in. They're either going to give it to us or they're not. So I have focused at this point at the more important data points that we need to go through, which really are the data points used to get someone through the diagrams that I created. So you'll see in the first column, this is a list of what I consider the primary data points. And if you think about the diagrams, the edit profile page, which is the blue box in my diagrams, you know, that's the one where if you say you're going to edit your profile, you come up with a list of all the different roles in sports and everything that you've added to your profile. So visible in the list means that this is going to be a column in that grid. So when I go in to edit my profile, what columns will I see for each of these things? And I don't think that we have to put the level in that list, which is basically, you know, professional, college, high school, youth, that type of thing. Maybe it needs to be there, maybe not. I don't think the team type was like a list of 5 things that were only in one of the profiles. We can touch on that later, but I don't think that's necessary. So if you look at this grid on my tab profile example, which is what I said, this is like an example of how I would fill out my profile when I go to do this. You're going to see the role, the sport. I don't know that we necessarily need the level to display on that page.
I think we
The
do.
one,
We'll talk about that later.
what's that, Bill? I'm
I
sorry.
think we do need that on there because it distinguishes what they are, but we can talk about that later after you go through this whole thing.
Yeah, John, I think your
Yeah.
point's really good, the way you have it recreational and then pickup. And
Yeah.
I think that makes a lot of sense to leave that in there because, yeah, some people might want to know there's pickup games and that kind of, and you're in charge of pickup games or you're on a pickup league.
Yeah, but remember, this is my edit profile page. So I think if I list that I'm an athlete and I list that I play softball and I have my different teams, I don't necessarily need to see that data point in this grid. Remember, you're going to be restricted to how much data you can see on the screen with the number of columns.
I'm thinking more
Okay,
kids. Like my kid's playing both high school soccer and extracurricular soccer. So I think it would
And
be sensible to have that still left, or it might just be optional, like you said.
Yeah, I don't think it has to show up on that edit profile page. You can still see it when you choose to edit that particular line item. You would still see that question and the answer that you've selected and what it is. But I don't think for you to identify one of your line items that you want to edit, I don't think you need level. Just like I don't think you need team type on that particular screen. I think as long as I see the role, the sport, the team, and or the league, that really tells me everything I need to know to choose that as the one I'm going to edit or delete.
Yeah, I agree.
Right?
So yeah, so if I wanted
So-
to edit my level, at some point and I click that in the blue box, I will have the option to change the level, but it just won't show in the blue box, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Okay, so that's what, if we go back to the data points, that's what visible in the list is. The field type kind of identifies how the user or what kind of field it is. So for example, when we ask for a team, a school, organization, or employer name, that's going to be a free form entry, which means it's a text box or something, and they just type in the name, and whatever they put in, we accept. The same with a facility or resource name, and the same with a child name. Those are free form data entry fields. Select means we're going to give them a choice, a bunch of choices, and they're going to select something from the list of choices we provide.
Are there single choices and multiple choices? Like you might
It
have
could be.
roles as a.
it could be, it depends. But at that point, whether they select one or multiple, that is something that we have to determine later for some of these fields. For example, once I put in that I'm an athlete for basketball, I'm not gonna multi-select the level. Either it's a high school team or it's a college team or something like that. Custom value is whether or not we want to, on the fields, the data points that are a select type, where you select an option, we need to determine whether we want to allow the user to put in a custom value. So for example, let's say the sports, we only have 3 options: baseball, basketball, football. Are we going to let someone type in tennis as the sport?
My answer would be yes, John.
Yeah, we would. I agree.
Well, the question I have for you is, if we do that and we store that as a custom value, tennis won't show up as an option for anybody else.
Why don't we
Right,
use that to
it's gonna-
capture it? Because we'll have a drop down that has the sports that we know of, but then it should be like other, if it's a new sport that we don't have up in that drop down list.
All right, that allows
Well,
it to be expandable.
the issue you have is if you have some back end processes, is, okay, this is a new sport that we don't have listed, and you automatically put that in the database so that other people can now start selecting it. I could put whatever I want in there. Could be
Yeah, I think-
malicious.
Yeah,
Could be a
ice
malicious
cream licking
term.
or something. Yeah, but I think actually that it should trigger something on the admin dashboard that we have to consider this sport as a new sport, and then allow other people to choose it.
Yeah, and then you would have to find a way to go back and update any user who has entered that data. So
Yeah,
you
that would be a
have
service.
to,
Wouldn't a code work there, John? Like I put a code, put the name of that, so you can just follow code to anybody else who did it already?
well, essentially what you would be storing is a value that means other or custom or something. Right, so the system, somebody would have to go back and say, oh, this person has an other value, which is now approved. So
Right.
I'd have to go and edit that. And that's going to be challenging, because what if I put in tennis and someone else puts in tennis but misspells it with one N? Like, there's no foolproof way that you can really totally automate it. You can automate it, but there's limitations.
Yeah, it has to be somebody actually looking at the others and taking that responsibility on.
Yes. So now, I would also say that maybe for the sport, you don't allow custom entries, okay? But for other things like the league and the division that someone is in, you know, we're going to be limited to how many leagues. Like, we can't populate the database with every single league that high school sports teams play in, okay? And if it's a little league, like youth recreational leagues, you know, there's so many league names, we just can't ever have an exhaustive list. So in the case of a league or division, you would want to allow custom entries, I think.
I would think also you want some way to store that then for someone else that comes by and happens to be in the same league, so that it pre-populates when they start typing it out.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, I don't know about that, Greg, because what you're going to do is, you know, for some little league, you might have 4 or 5 teams in an area that play basketball and baseball and football against each other, right? So what are you going to have? Maybe 1,000 people tops that are in that league.
Or it could be
So-
the
so the
AAU with
question-
$1 million. You don't know.
Yeah, I think it's
Well,
just,
I
because of our one
understand.
thing, like a youth, it should work okay that way. Youth recreational sport activity, you're gonna have other things in, and on that listing, we can find out who they are. A 10-year-old or a high schooler, you know the difference between the two.
And that goes back to our search too. The whole concept is, one of the nice things we can do is have, as that gets stored, it's storing the town and the league. And then if somebody else comes along and they're in that area and we've already stored the town or the zip code and we know that there's a league there, we can also suggest to that person who just came into UB Sports, there's a league in your sport within 5 miles or within 10 miles. And I'd expect that to
Right.
happen as we get bigger, obviously not really.
Okay,
up
so,
front, but as we go along.
my kid plays for the Springfield Recreational League. Springfield, Mass, Springfield, Georgia, Springfield, Washington.
Right, so it'd have to be a zip code
Does it
that it
matter?
associates with.
Well, so there's a complexity to this. This is a completely different requirement that we'll have to look at, okay, as to how that works. But definitely the custom value idea, and I've marked them all as TBD as to exactly how we want that to work. So if we do want to allow custom values, for example, in the sport, to me, there's only a finite number of sports.
Well,
And
right.
I think that our database should just have all of the sports listed. And you eliminate the custom value. However, other things such as the league or a facility type, right, you would potentially want to allow them. Now, facility types, if we look at some of the values of facility types, that's these guys. So there can be an alley, a batting cage, a course, a court, a field or a pitch, a gym, etc. I think the list of those things is kind of finite also, and we should be able to come up with a complete list of those things. So we should consider, which of the items that I've highlighted as yellow as to whether we want to allow custom values, whether we need to do that. And for those ones that we should, like the league or the division, we need to figure out the process for how that will work. Okay.
I have a question. What does RES stand for again?
What does what stand for?
RES, you have facilities, FAC.
Resource.
What is it?
Resource.
Okay, thank you.
So it could be a piece of equipment, for example, something like that.
So if for custom value, if we decided to allow for sport and league and division and facility and resource, right? What would go into that column? Would it be a yes, or would it be free form?
Well, it would be, what would happen is you'd basically have a drop-down list where you have a bunch of choices. And one of those choices is going to be other, for lack of a better word, it would say other. Now, when they pick other, it'll show, another text box will show up, and they would have to give us the name of it.
Is that what free form is?
No, free form means it's just a blank text box. You're not asking them to make a choice first.
Okay.
John, you know how.
But-
So for example,
Yeah.
So for example, on row 6 for a team name, if you're asking
Yep.
for the team name, that's a
Right.
free form entry because you can't pre-populate
Right.
potential team name.
Okay.
Sure.
Okay.
So TBD would be switched to change to yes, and then the follow-up from the yes is another text opportunity to fill in whatever the other is, correct?
Correct.
Yeah.
And then, there's each particular data point that we allow custom value for, there's subsequent ramifications to making that decision. And we would have to flush out those processes. So for example, as we've already discussed, if you allow someone to enter a custom answer for the sport they play, what do we do with that? Does it get highlighted on the admin dashboard so someone can approve it as a sport? Or do you leave it as a custom value? And if it does get approved by an admin as a sport, then how do you go back and modify all the existing users who have selected that
Can't you
as their
just
sport?
search
So
for
there's
that?
what's that?
Can't you just go back into the database and search then for ice cream licking or whatever the sport they decide, or
Well,
hockey tack, let's say?
Yeah, I mean, either someone can do it manually, or you would have some process that would do it.
Yeah.
But if you approve tennis, for example, and there's an automated process that picks everybody that picked tennis, then it can make that be their sport instead of the word other with some other value tucked away somewhere. But if I spell tennis TENIS, which is a misspelling, what's the admin process going to be in that case?
Well, wouldn't we have to approve
not-
the sport, wouldn't we? If we spell it wrong, we know it's wrong. So we have to confirm it or deny
Yeah,
it.
I mean, one of us would see it and say, oh, they meant tennis with two N's, but then that's a whole separate programming process to marry it up to another existing sport, right?
Yeah.
For example, let's look at horseback riding. There's English and there's traditional or something. There's basically
Western.
two types of horseback
Yeah, it's
riding,
called Western.
right? So if someone, if someone puts in English horseback riding as a custom value, do we want just horseback riding as the sport, or do we really want to have both styles as a sport? So there's a lot of work that goes into making that decision. So the answer, Greg, is yes, somebody can do this. It can in some ways be automated, but there's a maintenance process. Are you staffed to support that maintenance process?
The answer is we have to be, but I think also that if someone is all of a sudden they say equestrian, and then they say, well, I'm a barrel racing rider, and that's something that we don't have down, we would want to include that. All of a sudden it's barrel racing, and because that's Western barrel racing, but then to me, it's a marketing opportunity. And I'm always looking for these marketing opportunities. That gives us a chance to go to the other social media or do AdWords or tag words looking for other people who are barrel racing. And that could be another 500,000 members. So, equestrian has, English has at least 5 categories. It has, show, jumping, hunting, dressage. I think there's one more that I'm forgetting. But all those need to be like a subtree under equestrian, as well as Western and English. So the answer is we need to do that, and we need to be staffed, because that's another marketing opportunity for more members. And our whole goal in this whole thing is to make our stock worth more. And the way we do that is by increasing membership. So every chance I get an opportunity that we see like this, that allows us to do a little bit of marketing and bring in another 100,000 members, is very much worth it, because each member is worth $150 upon sale in 5 years, or just when we go IPO. So we have to be thinking not so much as per expeditiousness, but how we're going to, in the long run, in 5 years, make each share of our stock worth more. And that's how we do it. So we have to keep that in mind as we go along. Our goal is to make this population grow and to make their page views increase and their time on site increase. As you know, that's analytics. So we need to do that as in every step. We have to say, how do we increase membership? How do we increase their visits? How do we go out and say, hey, you need to come back to the site? And how do we get them to hit more pages when they're on the site, and how we get them to stay on the pages longer? So those are all important data points as we go along. So when we go through this, we have to say, is it more expeditious to do something like don't give them the choice and just have what we have up there, or say other and then fill in and then follow it up with who else is playing the sport and how do we get them to enjoy being on UB Sports? So, I mean, croquet, who would think croquet? But croquet is sort of a decent sized sport in the US and bigger overseas. And they play different kinds of croquet. But if we just said one regular kind of croquet, we'd be missing the subsets of 6 wicket, 9 wicket, 11 wicket, or what the heck it is. And, I think it's the more opportunities we have to customize this for the individual, the more they're going to see that we are looking out for them and that we are going to be able to cater to what their needs are. And that's why they're going to come back to UB Sports.
And the one important thing that I'm hearing from that is that maybe we don't just have a list of sports, but maybe sports are a multi-tiered category, subcategory type thing. So you pick equestrian, and if you pick equestrian, then you get some subtypes.
Absolutely.
Right?
The same
Eastern,
thing with
English and Western. Maybe you pick swimming, diving as a sport combined, and then there's a subcategory for the sport, which would be diving
or track and field.
This is right. So maybe we're not just asking for one thing when we ask them the sport. Maybe the sport, we need to think of a multi-layered categorization.
Right. If they click swimming, diving, you say diving, exactly. Absolutely, John. That's a great concept.
Because I think, when you throw the list of sports out, and it's like in a drop-down list, and I have to pick and choose a sport, that list is probably going to be sorted alphabetically. And yes, as I go to enter letters, maybe I enter letters and we only show them not like a traditional drop-down, which has all your choices, but I start pulling things back. So if I start typing horse for horse riding, I'm going to see anything that has the word horse in the sport name, whether it starts with the word horse or horses afterwards, like English horse riding. I would see that, and I would see just plain horseback riding, perhaps. In any case, so we really need to think about the categorization of sports and their subtypes. The type that I don't know what the right term is for it, but let's just call it the sub-sport right now. So, and if we have kind of a multi-tier categorization of our sports, then basically the same attributes that we are looking at now would apply to the sub sports as well. Okay, and that the sport, would you allow a custom value? The sub sports, would you allow custom values? And in those cases where you have custom values, while I agree that taking the custom value and having some combination of an automated or manual method to turn that into one of our options that we make available to people, that process has to be thought about. How would you staff that work? And how much does it take to develop that, to build it so that it's somewhat automated? And what's the regular process for handling that? Is this a daily chore for someone? Is it a weekly chore for someone? That kind of stuff. So in any case, that's one thing. I also, about sport, I also think with sport, we should be able to come up with a pretty comprehensive list of all the sports that are out there.
Yeah, we actually have one already on the current UB Sports. And if you go to ubsports.com/sports, that gives you all the ones that we have available. If not you, then me, because I'm in there as the super admin. So if you can't see it by doing ubsports.com.
Yeah, but I would imagine that even what's on UB Sports now is not a comprehensive list.
Well,
But
it's
that's-
interesting. I've been adding them as they come up. And
Well, I keep telling you to add Quates. You know.
did I not do that yet?
Anyway, no.
No, I
Anyway,
didn't know But I can add it down at the bottom. It just says new sport.
I think the value of the value to us to allow a custom value for a particular data point will vary depending on the specific data point. Okay, so for example, the same conversation we had about the sports will apply to a fitness trainer's discipline: CrossFit, yoga, Pilates, strength conditioning, etc. So we'd have to give the same consideration to that.
Yeah, we definitely have to do that because people are gonna, there are a lot of different fitness disciplines that we're not even going to start to think about. And someone's going to come up and say, how about this one? Hot yoga, for example, popped up, and all of a sudden you got to do hot yoga. So
everything we just discussed about the sport would apply to discipline. The league and division, I believe that what you could do is come up with a bunch of your professional, collegiate, interscholastic leagues and or divisions, and you can pre-populate them. If you want to capture names of smaller leagues like community leagues, like the Brooklyn Public School Recreational League or something, whatever it might be. If you want to start collecting those, you may not have the same automated process, but you may allow that to be searchable when I start typing something in. Okay. I think things get a little messy when you do that, because you're going to have typos, you're going to have different abbreviations. People might put the same league name. I might call it, the Allentown Rec League. Somebody else is going to put Allentown Recreational League. So when I type Allentown to start, I might get a list of, 200 or 300 different league names.
Right.
Which is going to make it complicated for me to really find what I want. So those are the types of considerations we have. I don't know that the custom value is quite as important for the league or the division. Maybe you just have an other if it's not something that we already have listed.
Well, can't that just
So that's
be,
what custom.
John, everything's going to be kept in MySQL database, right? So it would think
but they're going to be maintained in the database differently. Like
right,
we're going to have
exactly.
one list of things. We're going to have one list of things that would be leagues and divisions that we know about: NCAA, NFL, MLB, NHL, WNBA, NCAA Division I, NCAA Division II,
right,
etc. Okay, so there's going to be that list, and those are the things that we know about. But if someone goes to put in a custom value, that gets stored in a different list with all users' custom values.
right.
So the process that we've discussed would be to take it out of that custom value list of all users and make it into our master list. That's the process that has to happen.
Yes, I agree. It has to happen because I think our most important part of us is making sure we can bring anybody who comes into this or any team that comes into this to the proper space or place we need to put them in so they can get more experience or help from throughout our website. So you're right, John. We have to definitely take that, whatever that customize it, and that becomes a new standard somewhere on the list.
I definitely agree with
And
that.
I think I agree with that to an extent, but I think that I want to make sure that everybody is aware that it's going to be virtually not impossible. It's just going to be complicated for a user to find what they're looking for. Because when I type Allentown, I'm going to have a pop-up list of hundreds of names, which are not going to fit on my screen. And I'm going to have to start scrolling through that or typing more letters. So I have to make sure that the name that I'm spelling that league name or that team name or whatever, or in this case, it's a league or division name, that I'm spelling it the correct, appropriate way.
Right.
Right. So if I know that I'm in the NAIA league for some college sport, I might not really know what NAIA stands for. So I type NAIA and it may not pop up. So I put it in as a custom value. If I type the word Allentown, I'm going to have too many choices. So if I type Allentown recreational softball, I might not get the league I'm looking for, which is Allentown co-ed recreational softball.
Okay, but you've already limited it down to softball. So then when you start typing,
if I type the 3 words, it's not going to pull it back. It's going to match what I've typed. So if I type Allentown recreational softball, I'm only going to get exactly that term.
So if you start off with sport as the first thing you put in, that will also take care of your the right thing at the bottom, which is child profile is going to contain fan or athlete. Then if you have sport first and then roll after that, you've already taken out the child profiles thing you have down at the bottom. And then you set up sports. So you know softball. So then when you start typing in Allentown, it's going to go through all the softball teams and line those up. And you're ready down to, probably 1% of what the Allentown teams have, are. And then you just say, okay, men's, women's, whatever. But you get my point?
Maybe.
And then if you do team school org, you're also getting
my experience is that if you're using data values provided by users, it's going to eventually become messy.
Messy, of course.
There has to be some management and control over it. And that's the process that has to be defined. If you go to retrieve a team name, and like a team name may not always correspond to a specific sport. And maybe we have to do that. But like, for example, if an athletic trainer signs up and they choose, I'm an athletic trainer, I'm not going to pick a specific sport because it's basically for all sports. Okay. Or maybe it's multiple sports.
Yeah, usually multiple sports.
But I'm not going to pick a specific sport. And then I put the team name and or the league name that I'm part of, but it's not necessarily related to a specific sport.
Well, you wouldn't. But this is a really, really good exercise because in that case, when you're talking about an athletic trainer, usually he's there. He or she is connected to the school or facility rather than a sport. So that probably should be asked earlier. What's whatever we can squeeze out or like that'll help us narrow the field more quickly is what we should have the next thing we ask.
And that's exactly why when I did
Right.
certain roles, I put different asks before the other.
Exactly. Yeah.
Like for example, athletic director, I'm not going to ask for sports first. I'm going to say what school or what level or whatever. I mean, yeah, but I won't ask for sport first. That was exactly why when we didn't have everything lined up in terms of a hierarchy, because there were certain things that was more important to gather than others for certain roles.
Yeah, and the same thing when I did my profile development, I did the same thing. I said, here we need to know the sport first, and over here we need to know the facility first, or however that worked. For that reason, because it just helps us narrow things down a lot more quickly.
And I have a point. I ask of any club that or facility that we're working with, they're going to be kind of, I wouldn't say certified, but at least licensed to have some kind of permit. Like no Joe Schmo exercise routine coming up as a facility. I mean, so that you have like your example you mentioned earlier, John, was the softball from the Pennsylvania softball league. And then he said, well, it's a co-ed league. Well, if the name of the facility is this league, it'll have everything underneath that one facility name.
Well, the facility, keep in mind that the facility/resource is really only something that's accessible to the facility managers. So that's meant to be a gym, a baseball field, a soccer field, a stadium, an arena. It could be a piece of equipment like, the bench press #1, bench press #2, batting cage #1, 2, or 3, tackling dummies for football, those kind of things. So in the long run, a facility manager you would think would be able to enter all the facilities or resources that they manage and would be able to kind of create a schedule against those facilities.
Right. So that's going to obviously be a multi-choice fill in free form kind of list there for facility resource and resource type.
Yeah.
Well, the name of the facility and resource will be free form, but the type would be something that we can offer them a list to choose from.
And then what happens when, like, there are also going to be a number of resources in that facility, right? So then you need to have some kind of an open list where they can say, okay, we have gymnastics room, yoga room, hot yoga room.
Yeah, each of those would be a
aerobic.
separate. Each of those would be a separate facility.
Right.
Yeah.
Or a separate resource.
Or a separate resource, yeah. So under that one facility building, you can have a number of different. You have to make sure we set that up so that we can catch all of them.
Yes, I agree. Because my town, Lincroft area has the Lincroft Little League, it has Lincroft soccer, it has Lincroft flag football, it has Lincroft gymnastics, it has a lot of different things, and it's male and female and co-ed. On their website for that Lincroft League, they have it broken down so you can go to those facilities. So if somebody is looking on and wants to get on this and they come from Lincroft area, that should be like another drop down and give you little choices of where they want to go to.
Yeah, I mean, in my view, I would use names like if I was putting in different rooms in one building. I mean, I would give the name Building A, Room 1, Building A, Room 2, Building A, Room 3. But you could create a hierarchy where you put in the facility name and then you put in a resource name separately.
Right, you customize each one of those rooms to like yoga room or hot yoga room, whatever. Volleyball.
Yeah, I mean,
court.
to me, I think the flow of the questions that we saw for facility manager was, I wouldn't create a multi-level hierarchy where you have a bunch of resources in a specific building or facility. It would just be ultimately the resource that gets scheduled is what you're looking for the name for. That resource or room or facility, whatever you want to call it, is going to have a location associated with it. That location would identify a particular building or address or something along those lines.
Right, so
Okay,
that floats to the top of that decision tree as they're going through it.
Yeah, so I don't know that a hierarchy is essential in this case, but I would leave that to you guys to decide, and we can determine that, okay, there's a hierarchy here that we need to manage.
All
But
right, so
the
we'll do that for
vision
each one of
I
these
had,
roles.
yeah, the vision I had is it's going to have a name, and then somewhere else there's going to be something about that resource that it's located at this place, in this building, etc.
Hey, I have a question. Back to the data points. Is it possible for us to do required as opposed to not required entries? For example, if we did
Yeah,
want,
that's next. That's right here.
oh, okay. Because I was going to say, for the athletic director, maybe a sport isn't required.
Right. So let's carry on. I didn't really want to get too involved in the custom value attribute for these fields, but there are 4 of them that I highlighted in yellow that we need to really think about how we're going to handle those custom attributes. There's pros and cons for doing them or not doing them. And I think it's subject to further discussion on each of those 4 data points as to, do we allow custom values? And if we do, how do we handle it? What's supposed to happen to them? Whether they're manual or automated or a combination of automation with manual work. So we can set custom value aside, but that is clearly for those 4 data points, we have to decide what's going on with them, what we want to do. Now, as far as the various data points being required or optional, some of the, depending on the role that you select, some of the data points are going to be required, some of them are going to be optional, and some of them don't even apply. Okay, so if we look at some of the real simple ones first, when I say that I'm a facility manager, for example, obviously the role is required for every one of these. You're specifying your role for every profile item that you add. For a facility manager, you might not list a sport. You might not list a level, because if you run a gym, it could be used by high school. It could be used by community recreational. It could be used for basketball. It could be used for others, wrestling, etc. So I'm thinking that for a facility manager, the sport level, the team, the league or division, and the team type, those are all optional for a facility manager. The only thing that's going to really be required is the name of the facility or resource that he's managing. And of course, the type.
Right.
Okay, so that's one of the very simple ones. And it's kind of obvious that if I want to pick a sport because I manage only wrestling gyms, sure, I could put wrestling in as my sport. I could even say that it's high school or college. So, but they're optional, I think, in that case. I want to touch on parent next. And as I was going through these diagrams and things, the one thing I realized is when I say that I'm a parent, essentially, I'm not really going to store any data for myself as part of my profile. I'm going to give you a child name and whether the child is recruitable or not. But ultimately, all the data that I enter for that child, the sport, the level, the team, etc., is really part of the child's profile. Whether or not that child is a member of UB Sports, you're going to have a child profile. Okay. And I believe that when you get to the edit profile page, and I see that list of items, basically for a child, I'm only going to have one line item no matter how many sports they play. And I'm going to, when I click on that child, I'm basically going to get the same blue box page, that edit profile page, but it's going to be all the child's information, which is going to look just like it would if it was an adult's.
Right. But there again, we need to have a way for that person to say, I'm a parent of a child who plays football, but I'm really a softball player myself. And so you have to go back to that blue box and get back out and go to your role as an athlete.
Correct. And I think that when you look at it from the system perspective, is you're going to have, if I just pulled up the tab, which is like a profile example, this is what the edit profile page would look like.
Nice.
So it's going to have all my stuff here. This is all the stuff I'm involved in,
right,
or that I've told you about. And then it's going to say, well, I'm a parent of 2 children, Emily and Mason. So I could have a line item for everything that each child is in. Emily plays softball and field hockey for high school. Here's the high school name, the league or the division, the team type, and whether or not Emily is recruitable. And the same for my second child, Mason. He plays 3 sports in college, recruitable in 2 sports, but not in the 3rd. Okay. Or what you might do is simply have these 2 lines where it says, I'm a parent of Emily, I'm a parent of Mason. And when I click a button or I click Emily's name, I'm going to get basically this for Emily. And somewhere on the page, there's going to be a button like, I'm done with Emily. And you would go back to your page. Okay. That's how I envision that working. Because a parent, when they want to edit the child's profile, there's no difference between the questions we ask a child about their roles versus what we ask an adult. Some of the options might be different. And that was why on this screen, I made this note here about children profiles, that if you think about it, a child can only be a fan or an athlete. A child is not going to be an athletic director, an athletic trainer, a coach, or a fitness, they're not going to be any of those professional roles. And they're certainly not going to be a parent, even though you could have a 17-year-old who is a parent, but not going to be a parent of a child who's playing sports yet.
For your athlete under recruitable, it says NA. Will an athlete not have a chance to determine or say whether they want to be recruitable or not, like a parent?
They should.
No, they probably would.
Oh, so we should probably put required there or optional,
Optional.
optional.
Can I interject for a second? So, I mean, the whole debate about the parent filling out for the kid and having 2 tracks, one for themselves, one for their child, if that's possible, that only is like for kids. I mean, our child athlete is under 18, right? So it's for high school only, really, because otherwise there are legal adults at over 18, unless you graduate early from high school. So every college athlete by definition. So the whole recruitable thing, that track is really only for kids recruiting to go to college under 18.
Right.
By definition, the parent is the only one filling out the checking recruitable in theory anyway, because they're minors, right? So then the whole recruitable thing gets taken off once you're in college. Like your last Mason, he was in college playing sports. He's not recruitable because he's already in college.
I think the kid will also fill out the recruitable part. There's no reason why if I'm
Potentially,
15,
I
I'm not going to fill it out.
Yeah, the recruitable for pros.
I think you could. I think there's other situations for recruitable. I could be a 21-year-old athlete
Yep.
that's trying to get on an Olympic team.
Yep.
Yeah, I know, but I'm saying
So I
like
wanna
for
be-
the parent thing, by definition, every high school kid is going to be filled out by the parents, and then once they're over 18, right? It's just a
But wouldn't the athlete, the 8 or
No,
the
kids can
17-year-old
fill
also
out
be allowed?
their
Yeah,
kids can fill out
The
their
17
profiles.
yeah, right. They're allowed to have their own profile in conjunction with them, their mom.
If a child fills out their own profile, they're going to go through that parental approval process
Yeah.
to get approval. And if the child goes in and edits their profile and makes a change or adds something new or deletes something, when the parent views the child profile, that change, they're going to see the same thing.
Mhm.
So if the parent makes a change to a child's profile, the next time the child looks at it, they're going to see the change that the parent made. So it goes both ways. You're pulling the same set of data, the same profile for the child. It's just that the parent is viewing and able to modify the child's profile.
Yeah.
Right. And the parents should be able to see, be notified or have some kind of history there that says, hey, the kid adjusted this or that.
Yeah, they have to have notifications. So when the child makes a change, your parents notified. Because all the kids are going to do, they're going to go on themselves, make their own profile, tell their parents like months later and check the box that their parent, that's what they're going to do. They're going to check the box themselves.
Yeah, I mean, these are all functional requirements that have to certainly be built in if that's what we want. So,
So we should probably change recruitable for athlete to either optional or required. I don't know if required is necessary.
well,
I think optional.
I think if it's yes or no, if you make it optional, like it could be a checkbox, and
Yeah,
it's
and then it
optional.
opens up.
If they don't check it, or if you don't say yes, you're assuming they're not. So in that sense, it can be optional, because if they don't answer it, you assume they're not recruitable. Right.
Right.
So because it's a yes/no question. It's binary. It's either yes or no. And if they don't specifically say yes, you have to assume that it's no. So
Right.
whether it's required or optional is somewhat irrelevant, but I will
Okay.
change that. Okay, so we covered facility manager, we covered kind of the parent part of it. So let's look at an athlete. An athlete is going to tell us the sport and the level. So I played baseball in college or whatever. The team name is optional. I don't think, since that's a free form field and I'm asking for the team or the school or whatever, we could require it. Let me preface this all by saying all of these things kind of come out of the documents that you guys created, or my knowledge of what you guys have said or thought that you've wanted. But these have to all be reviewed and agreed on by you guys as a team. Okay, but these are the answers that I thought best suited whether or not something was required or optional. So for an athlete, you're not going to force them to enter a team name or a school name.
By the way, John, you know, we have in our databases someplace, we have a whole list of all the high schools and all the colleges and all schools in general in the United States. So we could actually start with those lists as, you know, that autofill drop down kind of thing.
We could, I mean, for example, if they say that they're in a high school, at the high school level,
We have their zip code already too.
like, you could, yeah, I mean, there's things that you could do to narrow that down with high schools. That won't be the end all and be all, because
No, it
of
won't.
course, if I play on a community team, there's nothing for you to give me an options to choose from,
Absolutely.
right?
Yeah.
So unless you're taking custom values and making them accessible, right? In that case, I would have the ability
Yeah,
to
Yeah, the second
to
person in will have
choose.
a little bit easier.
Yes, okay.
Excuse me, John,
So-
the sport for this athlete, I played 4 sports. I lettered in 3 of them, and I had multiple sports on there. So we have to do this for each different one by the time, or we can go like a sub menu onto my name of those sports that I'm doing.
You would go back and add a second sport.
As a subset,
So,
a sub sport.
yeah, I mean, if you would see that like in the diagrams that I built, the flow charts that I built on how a user would kind of experience this process. When I go in and say that I'm an athlete, I'll pick baseball, recreational. And then at the end, it'll say, I have more sports to enter. And if I click that, I go back and I say, okay, football at the high school level, more sports. So then I also play golf at the high school level. And then I say, okay, no more sports. And then I'm done. So you can repetitively go through that. That's kind of clear in the diagrams if you go back and you check those out.
You know, John, I still think that it
just
would be
like-
smarter to have radio buttons and then enter, so that we at least know what sports they're playing, and then have that list and then ask them to elucidate more about each one of the sports. I still think that makes more sense.
You could do it. I mean, you could do it that way.
Because if I'd much rather have this person, even if they don't want to fill out all their stuff, I'd at least know what other sports they're interested in. If they're looking at softball, I want to know so I can point them also
Well,
toward
I think-
baseball and soccer and whatever else they're playing.
And
Without knowing
while
what
I
other
say
people-
that that's valuable and I agree with you, there's absolutely no way you're going to get that by the second week of April. From what I know about programming and the functionality that they're going to have to build to continue to do that.
If we have a list of the sports already, which we do, and we can start there and just have that as radio buttons and have like a submit button at the bottom of that list, or on top and bottom of the list or of the page that you're looking at as you're
Okay,
scrolling
so-
through.
So let's say you have 100 sports and you want radio buttons. How do you fit that on your mobile phone display?
Probably the same way. You just have the buttons on the left, and it's the whole page. Then the whole screen then is the sports, and you just go
I'm
down.
gonna
and
have
say, yes, yes, yes.
And I keep scrolling and scrolling and scrolling and scrolling.
Well, there are only 100 of them, so you're gonna get like 15 or 20 on each screen, and you're looking for softball, so you're gonna scroll
You can
down. to
still,
softball.
Greg, I think you can still do multiple selections by having a field where I start typing.
Yeah.
And as I type, it pops up matching entries.
Uh-huh.
And if I pick one of those, it adds a second line for me to add a second sport.
That's
Okay?
just as good.
So
Yeah, John.
That works.
let's move away from
I have a question.
saying we want a bunch of check boxes or something. You know, let's let the technology, the functionality drive the technology that these guys will have to use.
I mean, had a lot of sites have like giant drop down lists of anything, states, anything. You know, it just they all exist. They do it on mobile devices too. You could maybe you could maybe kind of think of a subcategory. You could do search for your high school, by state, like a first way to reduce it, or maybe your
The
sport.
drop down list will not allow a user to start typing a word like horseback.
I'm saying like maybe you could do
And-
like your sport. If you want to narrow down that long list of sports, how many sports are going to be in that? I don't know, like 80 or whatever. You could do team or individual, and that would like maybe cut those lists. And you could, like if you're looking for a high school, you could maybe do it by state. Region. Region Northeast. Then by state. You can have subcategories. I don't know if they do that, but that might make those lists shorter.
Yeah, I mean,
And by starting with
that's not a
sport,
drop down. It's not a drop down.
Yeah. I don't know.
right? Well, the way they're doing it now on phones is that you'll have, like, for a state, for example, down at the bottom, like you see the thing that has to be filled in, it says state. Down at the bottom, it starts at Alabama and goes all the way through.
Yeah.
So, right? Or yeah, Alabama and then Alaska and all the way through. You scroll down and you pick whichever one is right. It
Okay,
pops up with lighting.
everybody here uses Amazon, right?
Yeah.
I imagine. So if you go to Amazon
On
or
your
even
phone.
eBay and you go to the search bar and you type in paper towels, it's going to start giving me some suggestions. So if I type the word paper, because I need to buy paper towels, it's going to pop up a little list of like 10 or 12 things that match that word. That's the kind of functionality I envision we're going to build. So it's not going to be a true drop-down list where you click the drop-down list and see every possible choice, because that's not searchable for a user. They're going to have to spin the spinner on their phone, or they're going to have to scroll down on their computer, etc. So they can't filter that list. So I think what we really want, and what you guys are describing, is more something like if you go to Amazon to do a search, that type of a thing, where I type one word or start to type a word, and it's going to give me some suggestions of things that match that word. And the more I type, the less choices I'm going to have to select from.
Yep.
So that's kind of the technical implementation of how I see it's going to work for the user.
Yeah, like a good search function. That's all, right?
Yeah. And back to the original point, Greg, with the multi-select, because if I multi-select sport and say there's 4 sports I'm involved in, you will have to start managing incomplete data in that process, that workflow, and it complicates the process. So the development time will be longer to build that now, and I don't think that'll hit our timeline. So perhaps that's something we want to do in a next phase, a future phase, but I don't think you're going to get that from these guys right away. So there is a constraint that we have in that regard. The other thing is, if I select 4 sports, there has to be some pre-programmed algorithm that defines what sequence you fill out the sports profile for. So if I come in and I say I'm an athlete and I play baseball, football, basketball, and golf, the system is going to have some predefined way to know that the sequence is baseball first, football second, basketball third, golf last.
Doesn't
So you're
the person do
forcing
it
a
automatically?
user. What's that?
Wouldn't you as an athlete do it automatically? You're going to put down softball first, skiing second, table tennis third, or whatever, and you're automatically like, usually I'm going to end up with a list that is my favorite, second favorite, third favorite, least important down at the bottom.
Sure, that can be your decision, but that means that as a user, I have to know, like, I'm gonna go through filling them out in the sequence in which I entered them.
Yeah.
So yes, that's true if I put my biggest one first, but you know, if you're offering a drop-down list or something, things tend to go alphabetical.
Yeah.
And if a user doesn't complete all 4 of the sports in that one sitting and they come back later, what sequence will they go through to finish their profile?
Well, if
Do
you're
we have
showing
to
the 4
remember the
sports, we can
sequence?
go back to what Daynia was saying last time we spoke and have the percentage you finished. Right? You can see I finished all of my baseball stats. Now I'm talking about softball. So those other 3 sports are right there waiting for you to tap on them and continue.
But,
Yeah, but you're gonna have call outs that say your profile is only 20% complete. Let's say I finish one of the 4 sports, right? So it says,
Right.
okay, it's 25% complete. And I click that button to complete my profile. What sequence am I going to go through it? The system will have to know what sequence. Will it be alphabetical at that point? Will it still be based on the order?
I thought each sport would have its own percentage. Like you've
Yeah.
completed 100% of your basketball profile, 25% of your baseball, 75% of the volleyball. That each role would have a different percentage, not a percentage for the
Okay, so-
entire profile.
So when I first log in, you know, on the home page that I see, there's going to be no call out there in general? I mean, you could have a percentage for each sport, that this sport's 100%, this sport is 75%, this one is 0%, whatever. But wouldn't you have a general percentage for your entire profile?
Yeah, I think so.
I
Right, so-
wasn't thinking that when we were discussing how do we make them go back? What order would we make them go back to the profile, the
I
sport, or
think
whatever? I was
You're
just
right,
thinking
Daynia. I
about
think each
that.
one of the sports has to have that percentage.
you can
Yeah.
start out with the on your homepage, so to speak, when you log in. Oh,
And
you only have 25% done.
Yeah.
Click here to continue, and when you click there, it goes to the profile. It has a breakdown of all the sports you did and what their percentages are done. So,
Yeah.
okay, I finished
Like a
basketball.
shout out to see like each different, like let's say 3 different profiles, but your profile is comprised of 3 different sports, right? So 3 different, a third, and you finish 2, but not the last one. Should it say your football profile is 20% full finish, or you say your profile is not complete? You have where to finish. I don't know if you need to like break. I think it'd be hard technologically to break down every profile. I think you just say your profile is incomplete. You go back, and then it can tell you how much what needs to be completed.
Yeah, that works. I agree, Les.
I mean, isn't it that blue box, John, that you talked about, the blue box?
Yep.
Is that blue box only visible after you have hit stop on everything? Or is it going to be available every time you
Visible
log
at
in?
any time. Anytime.
So-
Visible whenever you click the edit your sports profile button.
So would it be possible to have it visible as soon as you go into your profile? Just in case the first thing you want to do is make edits. 3 months down the line or a year later.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
I think there's gonna be a menu button. Like if somewhere on the page, there's gonna be my name somewhere that indicates that I'm kind of logged in, right? So if I click that, it's gonna say, oh, go to your account settings, which would be
Right.
your email address and your password. And then it's gonna have a button for edit your basic profile info. I don't know what words we'll actually use, but that will take me to like my name, my date of birth, the city and town that I live in, my zip code, some of that basic info like that. And then there's going to also be another option to edit your sports profile. So when I click edit, somehow I have to say, I want to edit my sports profile. So there is no one immediate place that you would go. I mean, you could have one option that says edit profile, but then you're going to get a page that gives you choices. Well, which part of your profile do you want to edit? Your basic profile, your sports profile, your account settings, your notification settings, things like that. So there is no one distinct choice to go edit your profile and you'd end up on your sports data, because there is other profile data that you're going to have.
So you just click through and click to whatever one. You go to the first page to edit your address, you move the second page, third page to go.
Yeah, exactly. So, but the question was, when I click edit profile, is that the first thing I'm going to see? No, you're probably going to have to ask them or have different menu options. So somehow the user has to indicate that it's the sports profile that they want to update.
So what we need to have is when they click to edit your profile, it has to have broad categories, like
or you might have 3 menu items. You might have a menu item that says edit your basic profile.
Right.
Another item that says edit your sports profile.
Exactly.
It could be a menu item. It doesn't have to be another page that you display with their choices. It could be in the menu.
And John, I think instead of sports having like what you were saying before, Greg, about all the different sports as a menu, break them in and click them all.
Uh-huh.
The listing we have of 100 of those sports, couldn't that be put in as part of the standard sports that are on your list, John? And then any additions we can add later on, so that when you type in a particular sport, like maybe badminton, it pops up.
Over the weekend, I read.
Click on, you get a.
Over the weekend, I read that there's like 1,800 officially recognized sports. So we could put all 1,800 in.
What does
So,
that include?
yes.
Like cat throwing?
Whatever. Remember, there's sports in other countries that don't even exist in the U.S. So the point is that, yes, we can start our list of sports to be as complete and thorough as we want. And somewhere, some way, at some point along the line, somebody among us needs to come up with what is the list of sports that we're going to start with in the database. So somebody needs to figure that out. All of us, one of us.
That's a good question. I might be missed this. Do we have like a general like minimum viable product? Like what is it you want to have accomplished for this launch? Like, like all the recruiting sports and like all the, and maybe not the wellness stuff, or like you have to stagger it, or what is like the goal like for the first, kind of launch? Is that like written down? Do you guys have a sense of what it is? Or
well, I know the recruiting stuff is not, because that's a second app, a separate app, and subsequent changes to the website. So the
It's
actual recruiting module isn't.
so you want to get like the youth athletes, get the sports up, get the ADs up, like get all that stuff up on the website. That's the goal. Is that what it is?
To get them started, at least being on the site in one way or another. That's why we need these roles set up like this.
But you have to be really specific. Like, what exactly do you want this launch, initial launch, to accomplish? Like, what, like you have that written down somewhere, right? What you're trying to.
I think we're at it right now.
Yeah,
like,
I mean, it's
what we have right now.
It's all of these. Leslie, the answer is that all of these roles are part of the spec.
Right, but what
So,
I'm saying is like, but you're not going to touch like, I mean, this is all like sports and roles, and that's it. You're not going to get into the app. You're not going to get into like, you're going to get the kids going to have their recruiting page. If they want to be recruited, they'll be able to make a profile.
I would say membership and sponsorship, right, Greg? Those would be the
Well,
two main
membership, and also we do have to have
advertising.
a couple of pages of the personal profile, so at least can start like, going back and marketing these people when we do have, like, if they give us their top 5 or 10 sports, when we do bring in a new Olympic athlete to manage and curate their sport, we need to be able to go back and say, hey, the number 1 field hockey player in the nation just signed up, is now curating your portal. Come back and look at it.
Yeah.
So we need to know what their sports are, at least, so we can start doing that. So we need the locality, we need the sport. If they can start digging in with the first couple of pages of their profile, that's important. But we do have to, at least have that down so we can get into it. And that's where I think it's important to start, but we're going to have a lot of information on the site when we launch, because we already have a lot of stuff in our databases for 60 sports. And so we do have a lot to start off with. And as soon as we take on a curator, an ambassador, they're going to be changing and adding to that stuff. And that's where we can really start bringing people back, when we start having new information, or just, and that's something we need a couple of community managers who are managing, who don't really have a sport, or who are not an Olympic athlete, but on our payroll, we should be going back to the sports that don't have ambassadors and try to load on a regular basis a couple of items in there, 1 or 2 videos that are popular in that sport, and then advertise to those people who've already said they're playing that sport. Even if it's not an Olympic athlete telling them to come back, start getting them at least interested in what we're doing with that sport portal.
Yeah, I think it's important to make sure we not just to get them involved in us on UB Sports, but to want to stay here, want to come to us hours now. So we have to keep adding more and more to it as we go along.
Yeah, it's got to be of interest, and that's what's going to bring them back.
Okay, so getting back to these attributes, I'm not going to go line by line through each of the roles. You guys can all kind of review that, provide feedback, make suggestions for changes or whatever. But this will show you that for what roles are things required or optional. So that's that. The data point values. So these are the various data points, the same ones that we were just talking about as far as what like the attributes are, those data points. And here's the 11 roles that have been predefined that we're building in the system. Here's an incomplete list of sports. Okay, again, the question remains as to whether we're going to allow custom entries for the sport. And at some point, we need to figure out what sports we're going to pre-populate in the database for launch. Is it going to be a comprehensive list of 1,800 sports? Is it going to be just the 100 that we currently have in our database now? What do we want to do with that? Obviously, if we have a comprehensive list of 1,800 sports, you would negate the need for a custom sport, right? If you had everything.
I think you still end up with extra sports being added, and there's sports being added all the time.
Maybe.
But I think the 100 that we have down there are pretty much 95% of what we're going to see.
You mean the 100, right?
Yeah, the 100 that we have up on our site now.
Yeah, I would start that 100, and we can always add customs as we go along from there.
Agreed.
The level, all of these values have come, except for one of them, all of them have come from the various documents that you guys have created. There is some overlap in some of these levels. And typically that overlap is because the terminology for a level was different for one of the roles versus another role. This list has to be refined and perfected. We need to figure out what all the levels are. It's sorted alphabetically, but you can see that there's professional, semi-pro, college. Here's where you'll see differences. Sometimes a level is specified as high school, but in other cases, you might specify high school JV and high school varsity. And in other cases, you might not distinguish. Olympic, junior Olympic.
Might take elementary school off that list. I don't know.
Which one?
Elementary school, because there's no organized elementary school sports in the school. It's all youth, like recreational outside the school until in the United States, I think it's middle school, right? 6th grade, they begin. And even that now, in New York State, they pass middle school, they go ahead to 7th grade. So they're usually organized until like usually middle school, sometimes 7th grade. So I don't know if there is elementary school sports. I've never seen it. It's really youth sports or recreation or parish, at that level, right?
Yeah,
Private schools are not, like Catholic elementary schools. They have little sports all the way up. Majority are 6, 7.
Private. Private might, well, I don't know if they play organized sports, and I've been in private schools.
Big in basketball. Big basketball and softball and baseball.
In elementary schools?
Elementary?
My St. Leo's elementary school here has 6th, 7th, and 8th grade mostly. Probably middle school, I guess, would be.
It's middle school, yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's like 6th or 7th it starts. In New York State is 7th, but I've never seen like if it's a 3rd grade team, it's a rec team, it's a CYO team, right? Or it's like
Yeah, Catholic CYO,
it's parish or rec, or it's Little League or your town team.
Correct.
PSAL,
Now,
PSL.
the biggest question regarding the levels is
Redundancy.
what has to do more with like the community teams. Like obviously the professional and semi-pro levels are obvious. College and junior college levels are obvious. Some of the
College could
school
still be broken
levels
down.
are obvious.
College could still be
What's that?
broken down. College can still be broken down to Division 1, Division 2, Division 3.
Junior.
And then you also have, well, that'll be under the leagues. Oh yeah, yeah. So I'll say Division 1, Division 2, Division 3 would be college's breakdown.
Yeah.
Correct. I would think that would be the under league division. You wouldn't break college down based on the division that they're in. Not when you're looking for the level. But when you get into recreational sports, okay, so here you have the recreational option, which sometimes was good enough. That's what was specified in some of the documents you guys created. But you might want to know if it's adult or youth recreational.
True.
So there's some overlap, and you'll see that when there are relationships between some of these things, that'll get narrowed down. But this list is going to have to kind of be refined. If you have a community team, it could be a parish or church team.
Yeah.
It could be one of the others was a community recreational team. There was a city or town team. So they all kind of fell under that community group. So there is overlap here. So this is going to take some work to really define what we want and how they show up when you start looking at the relationships between a sport and the level. Like for football, you might break high school down into varsity and junior varsity, but maybe for golf, you don't. You just have high school.
Sure.
So that kind of thing has to be thought of, okay? And it was the community things and the recreational stuff where I found it most challenging to come up with a succinct set of terms for these
How about
levels.
like just, it's pro, college and youth. I mean, right? Or and then maybe Olympics are in there somewhere, but that's really what it is. Because a lot of this, half that falls under youth. Youth is high school, youth is rec, it's, community.
Well, I think the level, I would think that when you play high school sports, even though it's a youth sport, it's different than playing in the local rec leagues.
Yeah, but you're still a youth athlete. You have main categories. I would do like adult,
Maybe.
Yeah, like a pro,
Then
yes, college.
You're
And
forcing,
that's
have an
totally
extra click, though.
conceivable.
What'd you say, Greg?
You're forcing people to make an extra click. We're trying to keep these clicks down to a minimum that you see fewer pages. I think if you have to go through like youth and then go into youth.
Well, here's an example.
Yeah.
If we look back at, I don't know who did the athlete role. Daynia, was that you?
Yes.
Like the question, like if I said I'm an athlete, the next question was going to be, what sport do you play?
Right.
And then the third question was basically the level, which you had said was professional, college, high school, youth, and Olympic.
Right.
So now to me, it seems like there's a reason why youth and high school are being segregated in that particular case, Leslie.
Mm.
Correct.
So So that's where it comes from. Whether or not we categorize, just say high school is youth and be done with it, that might be
Okay.
fine.
Yeah, and I
know-
don't agree with that. And I also think the bigger the net, the more we catch. Like if we give people the option to fit into the right category, we'll be better off in the long run when it comes to identifying them and their interest in marketing needs and all that stuff. So
Yeah, I'm not saying you make the list less. I'm saying how you categorize it, like a category and then a subcategory, just to route it and organize it. So people are, you can scroll down a long list and like, how do you find your stuff, right? Or you can go, it may be an extra click, but you say, okay, youth sport, then you go boom, 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 and it's just a way to route people so they can get through that quicker. I'm an adult, pick up, that's what I was thinking. I wasn't thinking to make less choices, like categories,
okay.
but how to organize them for someone going on to quickly access like where they are on that list.
Okay, I see what you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, those are kind of design elements,
Mhm.
as well as technically how the database would be set up. In other words, you would have like 2 lists. If you had youth and then under it, you had high school, and then maybe under high school, you have JV and varsity or something.
I'm a
That's
big fan of
3
this. I'm a big fan
that's
of
3
this.
categories that you have to have relationships for. So the complexity increases,
Right.
the design of it. Do you increase the complexity to get an easier design? Is that design better where you click youth first and then pick high school second?
I'm a
Or is
big
it
fan
better
of
just
this.
to have?
I'm a big fan of this alphabetical drop box and list, to be honest.
So anyway, the takeaway at this point, we're not making decisions right here at this, is that this list needs to be refined. We need to make sure that this list of values fits all of the scenarios that someone could use to build their profile. Okay.
Can somebody pick more than one level? Like in high school, I was a captain of my junior varsity, but I also played the varsity level.
Yeah, I mean, you could put them in as 2 different teams. So that would show up that you would do athlete twice. Once for your JV team and once for your varsity team. Because the team names are going to be different. The league might be different, or the division might be different. Maybe not. Or in that case,
Clippers mental health.
Yeah, let's say you're
in any
playing
case-
basketball. I have a question. So like an obvious one, basketball, and the kids playing on their high school team. You probably wouldn't do rec also, but then a travel team. So that's going to show up as one sport, but 2 different teams on the same sport. You wouldn't have to do different pages, 2 different teams, because it's the same sport, right?
yeah, but like if I flip over to this example profile, I would have, that would be like 2 line items.
So I'm having one sport, my profile for basketball, and it'll show that I have 2 different teams for my travel team and my high school team, the name of my high school team, the name of my travel team on the same page for this one sport. Right? Not 2
Yeah,
different.
like if you look at what I've highlighted, like I play on 5 different softball teams.
Mhm.
So I have 5 line items. Because they could each have some different thing, where I play on the Renegades in League A and Murph Guide in League B and Wall Bangers is in League 3.
So you're an adult, but let's like a youth athlete. So that youth athlete's going to have their profile of one sport, and for that, or maybe they're more than one, but for that one sport of basketball, they can have their multiple teams and their positions and the level of those teams on that one page for that one sport, right?
Yeah, like if you look down here, this is like a child's profile, which, it's no different between being a child or an adult. But I could say I play basketball in college for whoever, but then there'd be another item that says I play basketball in some rec league.
Yeah, on the same, on their profile.
Yeah, it would be 2 line items.
Okay.
So I could go in and edit each one differently.
If you go back into the profile of that particular student, say athlete, and it says that athlete likes basketball, that's all you're going to see is basketball. So you click their profile, and then you'll see the 2 line items.
Yeah. Okay.
Right?
Yeah. Okay.
That-
Under league and division, this, of course, we are going to have to, probably have that custom value to allow people to put leagues and divisions, because we can't pre-populate them all. That, of course, rolls into the discussion, well, how do we make those custom values accessible as part of our list? But you could pre-populate, this is an incomplete list, but you could pre-populate a bunch of different divisions or leagues.
Yeah, think of all the
For
adult
example,
athletes,
someone might,
all these men or women too, but are playing pickup, whatever, in their little town, and they have some, over 40 league, there's gonna be so many different names that are not, official, right? That are gonna be part of this, mostly for adults.
and that's why if you look back at the specs for an athlete, the league and division is optional.
Yeah.
So if I don't even want to
You could
put
have
in the
college
name of the
athletes
league,
that
I
play
don't have to.
overseas. You could have pro lacrosse leagues overseas in Europe, women's basketball, men's basketball overseas, like all these little, some sports that, soccer,
Right.
even, or, yeah, some kind of pro league in Europe that we never heard of, right? Yeah.
Right. So the concept is that they would be able to put in a custom value, and then it's a matter of how do we make that custom value that one person entered accessible to anybody else who might want to use that same
Yeah.
league or division. And again, there is overlap here. So you might want to say that your NCAA Division I in baseball, but for football, you're probably going to want to specify which conference you're in within Division I, FBS, FCS. So that the league and the division, there is some overlap, but I think it's derived from what sport you play. Okay. The team types.
No, go back. Like Division I, you're going to just go through all the sports, a Big 10, Big 12, Pac-12. You're just going to hit them all, right? For Division I, they're all the same.
Maybe not. I think that depends on the sport.
Yeah, but the league for Division I is not going to change by sport. The league is what it is. There's like the Big East and the ACC. That doesn't change based on the sport. It's just all the leagues under Division I, right?
Yeah, I mean, Division I is the league, I think, and then you have either a conference or a division is like the Big East and Big 12.
I meant conference. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, so again, the terminology, the terminology can be whatever, but there may be some, like Michigan is a Big 10 school, Big 12 school, whatever Michigan is, right? So depending on the sport, I might say that I'm play for University of Michigan in the Big 12, but someone who plays golf for University of Michigan may not be in the Big 12. There might not be a golf conference, but it's NCAA golf or it's Division I golf.
Mhm.
So I think that is derived by the sport. I think a college basketball player.
I don't know if that's even true. I don't know. Is that right?
John, I'm just jumping in because I had to take a call, but just looking at where we are right now, I don't know if you guys spoke about this, but you did list some conferences, but there are 32 Division I conferences and not
It's an
all are
incomplete
listed.
list.
So I wouldn't
incomplete
even
list.
list the conference. But my point is, I wouldn't even list out the conferences. I would just keep it NCAA Division I, Division II, Division III, NAIA, CIAA. I don't think there's a need to break down the divisions.
Maybe not. Maybe you might be right.
Yeah, I mean, break down the leagues. I'm sorry. The leagues is not, I don't think the league is necessary because obviously if I put NCAA Division I, and then the next thing is asking me the name of the school, right? Because I think that's somewhere there, the name of the school. And I say Duke, everyone's going to know it's ACC. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I kind of agree with that. Yeah, why how does it add value to have that extra,
I don't know.
The league.
I don't know.
But I do see why you say league because professional leagues like football or soccer or whatever, it's not called division, it's called leagues. So I think league and division is a great headline, but I don't want when I think of leagues in basketball, I'm thinking more of conferences. Does that make sense? So
Yeah,
it's
and like,
the same thing, but I don't
I-
think we need to break down the terminology of league when it comes to college. I think NCAA Division 1, 2, 3 is good enough. But leagues
Yeah,
is
I mean,
also good to have. NFL.
I think I
and
left out the
NBA.
word, I think I left out the word conference just because I did, but it could be league, conference, division. So the question the user would be asked is, what league or conference or division do you play for this team, right? Maybe we only need quote unquote the league. Maybe we don't need to break it down to ACC, Big 12, Big 10, Big East.
Yeah. I kind
Maybe
of
we
agree
don't
with-
need to
yeah.
break out. Yeah, so in any case, as with all the rest of the data points, this is an incomplete list. It might include things you don't want. So it does need to be refined and finalized before launch. And the best way to look at it is, what do we need to know from these people about the leagues and divisions? Sadly, Greg has walked away. I think Greg would wax philosophic about, yeah, I'd like to know what conference or leagues or whatever, but perhaps that's a secondary question that's not as important.
Yeah, it might be a secondary
type-
question.
Oh, Greg is there. Greg,
Yeah,
is
I
your
had, to
cam
get, I had to
frozen?
get into my car, so I had to get on the phone instead of the computer. But the computer's still going though. We're still recording on that side.
Oh, okay, I got it. The team type specifically came out of one of the things for the team and club manager. Whereas you basically would say whether it was middle school, high school, junior college, but they were all like school teams. So to me, there was a team type, which was school team, club team, a community team, a professional team, an Olympic team. Those were the 5 types that were in there. Some thoughts that I had about team type is, do you want to break those down as being adult or youth? Especially in the case of a school or a
Actually,
community
none
team.
of those team types, if I'm an adult playing pickup soccer with my friends or something on the weekends, I wouldn't resonate any of those with an adult league, because those are all.
Well, it would fall under a community team.
But it's not a
but-
community team. It's like a pickup team where a bunch of guys get together and we made an adult league. It's like like the I don't.
Yeah, and I think that would be optional for an athlete,
What about team
for the
slash
athletic.
group?
Well, I don't know what you mean by group, but in any case, the team type is optional for an athlete. So they're not like, if you're playing pickup and it doesn't resonate with you, you don't have to pick one.
Right.
Yeah, so it just doesn't matter. Okay. So that's where like knowing whether something is required or optional or whatever comes into play.
Right.
The disciplines, this was only used for the fitness trainers. Again, we have a question as to whether or not we should allow custom entries for the disciplines. And again, it's not a complete list. This has to be flushed out and finalized.
Hey, remember
facil-
the last call we had? We kind of had that discussion about fitness training and sports, identifying with sports and strength and conditioning coaches.
Yep.
I asked a couple of people and they said, first of all, they don't think a fitness trainer or a strength and conditioning coach would identify themselves with any particular sport. Because
Right.
obviously strength and conditioning coaches do multiple sports. And they said fitness training, I think that was one of our categories. They said that yoga instructors and certain movement trainings would not consider themselves a fitness trainer, because to them that's, I wouldn't say use the word demeaning, but it takes value away from what they do. So she recommended that we find a terminology or role that houses yoga and some of these disciplines that's
Discipline.
outside of fitness training. She suggested movement training or something else that kind of gives them their own lane other than a fitness trainer. Because to them, a fitness trainer is somebody you go to, you know, lose weight. Like if a gym has a fitness trainer that you want to hire to help you lose weight, it kind of devalues their discipline or their expertise or whatever. So that was a feedback that I got. And I got also
Okay,
strength
so-
and conditioning coaches want their own lane. Like they're not a coach, they're not a fitness trainer. They're kind of like they want their own role in terms of being, you know, an athlete, athletic director, fitness, strength and conditioning coach. Like they're very particular about what they do and how they do it, and it doesn't really translate to any of the others.
Which group was that? I didn't hear you say.
There's a
What was
couple,
that for, Daynia?
there's a couple,
What group was that for, Daynia? You just said, who wants their own lane? I missed what you said.
Strength and conditioning coaches.
Okay.
Yeah. Sorry, John, go ahead.
there's a couple things I take away from that. One, more importantly for Greg, is we should take that information and consider whether fitness trainer is the right name for that app.
I'm not sold
For
on
the
that
fitness
either.
trainer
I
app?
think wellness.
How about wellness
Uh,
disciplines? And then you say like yoga, Pilates, like they're kind of, you know, wellness, health disciplines are not really fitness. Maybe that's, yeah.
Okay, so the term, that's one thing, is the name of that app. Number two is, for the time being, and probably for the foreseeable future, even though we refer to it as fitness trainer, and that's what we might call it in our database, doesn't mean it has to apply. So the question that we would put on the screen for the user to answer, like for the role, when they have to select the role, it won't necessarily just say fitness trainer. It could say fitness trainer, yoga instructor, strength and conditioning coaches. It could have a list or sequence and you pick that one. But from a system perspective, they're all the same role, regardless of what term we use.
I
Okay.
like that, John. Yeah.
The third thing is when we were discussing, because the discipline is going to be selected only by a fitness trainer or whatever we call them.
What about trainer/instructor?
Yeah, maybe. What about like someone who's a meditation guide, you know, something weird like that? Someone might come on, you know, and be like, you know, I'm a wellness, you know, some other kind of, you know, role, you know, I don't know, maybe they
But
should.
John, to your point, I like the idea of you select fitness trainer, but then you give them an option to put specifically what they do. But
Yeah.
my point is like, or just to answer my own question, if I am a strength and conditioning coach, would I know to pick strength and fitness trainer and eventually get to my position? Would I know to do that?
Well, yeah, because the question would show up on the screen for the user. It'll say, you know, are you an athlete? Are you an athletic director? Are you an athletic trainer? Are you a fitness trainer / yoga instructor / strength and conditioning coach? Something like that. Like the language would have to reflect that.
Gotcha.
But it, you know, and you could have, and yes, you could have potentially 3 buttons or 3 check boxes, one just specifically for fitness trainer, one for yoga instructor, and another for strength and conditioning. But whichever one you pick in the database, it's going to be the same role,
Right.
regardless of what we call it in the database. It's the same role. The functionality and the features that user gets in the app and on the website is going to be the same as each other's.
Yeah, but to attract the person in there, I think the role should actually say maybe wellness trainer as opposed to fitness trainer. For the people who may be
Or
interested.
maybe it says both.
Yeah,
Maybe it says both.
I would do both. I was just thinking,
I like both.
fitness trainer, wellness, you know,
Yeah.
whatever.
Instructor.
Yoga.
Instructor, yeah. They want to be
Yeah.
instructors. That's what
Yeah,
I,
well, that's what I'm saying. Trainer or instructor, I think covers everything.
yeah, fitness, wellness, trainer, instructor.
And
whatever.
again, this, just like every other data point, is subject to being refined and completed, okay?
Right.
Right.
And we're ending up in these discussions that are going to take more thought than just a couple comments here. We have to, as a team, kind of go through, look at the scenarios. Now, one
Right.
thing, and I raised this the other day, but the disciplines that you pick here are only selected by someone who says they're a fitness trainer.
Right.
Everybody else picks a sport. So
Right.
to me, it seems like I could take these things that are disciplines and put them in the database the same way here. And when I go through and I say that I'm a fitness trainer, I'm only going to see these options.
Mm.
If I'm anything else, I'm only going to see those options.
Mhm.
Okay, so that's kind of what I was thinking, was instead of having two things, and this will become obvious when I get to the next screen in the spreadsheet. Moving on, the facility or the resource name only accessible by a facility manager. This is the name of the facility or the resources that they're managing.
John, if we
Those
go to
facilities and
100
resources.
sports, if we go to 100 sports, I don't think we should add the discipline there because they'll get lost. I'm just thinking of that.
Well, no, because if I say that I'm a fitness trainer, the only ones I'm going to show are the ones
Okay, I see what you're saying.
here.
Okay,
Right.
okay, guys.
I would know not
Gotcha.
to show the other ones.
Okay.
Okay,
And
facility
what you can
resource
do-
names.
You could put fitness trainer, wellness instructor, and basically you'd have the same disciplines under each, but they're defining themselves in their own title, and it'd be the same thing. So you wouldn't lose anybody. They could say, I'm a wellness instructor, not a fitness trainer, but then the discipline list is the same, they just run
Yes.
that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Why would you
Right.
even break that out? Why would you just keep it under one title, fitness trainer, instructor, and then under there you just have those broken out? You don't need a decision tree there, one or the other.
Because they might
Do you,
think
John?
they're not a fitness trainer. They feel like they're a wellness, they're a meditation group or something.
But the initial question is going to be, are you a fitness trainer, wellness trainer, yoga instructor, strength condition, however many distinct things we have to make them feel like it's their own deal. That's what we can do. And it could potentially be 5 or 6 different buttons, one for fitness trainer, one for wellness. And regardless of which one you pick, it's still going to go in the database as the same thing.
Right. Yeah. So you have to add a role for like under your role number, 8 fitness. You got to add like wellness instructor or something else that sounds less,
Well, that wouldn't be the case, but this would change. Instead of being fitness trainer, it would be wellness instructor, yoga instructor.
I would just say wellness instructor, and then that would categorize everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would
You
forget
said
about
that.
the yoga instructor because
That's
that's
too specific.
going to
You
fit
can
under one of those wellness
You'll
categories.
put fitness wellness instructor or fitness
Right.
trainer wellness instructor or something like that.
Like the way you said before, Leslie, you said fitness trainer, wellness instructor was pretty good.
Yeah, I like that combo.
I agree.
Good combo.
Because that covers like the Pilates and the yoga, and then you could get meditation. People are all into wellness and meditating. You don't know what you're gonna get.
Yeah, and don't forget that Daynia said that the strength and conditioning coaches think of themselves differently.
What about
Now, I would almost
'cause
say-
there's a whole institute for that, for the strength
I
and
would-
conditioning.
I would almost say that if I'm a strength and conditioning coach, and I don't really consider myself being a fitness trainer or wellness instructor, maybe they would go in under coach.
Yeah, no, I asked that question and they said definitely not.
so
Yeah, it's not a coach.
Okay.
you can make a strength
Okay.
coach. Maybe they're a strength coach, and then everybody else is a fitness trainer, wellness instructor. But
Well, no, they really know that they're trainers, not coaches.
Yes, I was a trainer for high school. I was
But Dana's saying you're insulting their ego, that they want their own little special place. So they're going to be annoyed if they're in the lane with the wellness instructors.
No, I don't think they'll be annoyed. I think that the fitness trainer
They wanna
slash
see it
wellness
called out.
instructor slash strength and conditioning coach puts them in that category. I mean,
Okay.
but it's specified strength and conditioning coach. I think if you left that out and expected them to be part of that, that's when they take offense. But if you add it as part of that fitness trainer slash wellness instructor slash strength and conditioning coach, that's
Yeah.
where they belong.
Maybe put them first, strength conditioning first, then fitness, then wellness, you know?
Yeah, it doesn't, yeah, either way,
Hierarchy, whatever.
yeah, either way. But John, I think they definitely, the slashes that you had, I think was perfect.
Yeah, but not yoga, because that's
Right,
already
so-
like the next division.
Yeah, no
Well,
yoga.
Yeah, just not yoga.
Yeah, no yoga.
And,
Oh,
and,
yeah.
and again, you know, the big takeaway is that these lists have to be refined. We have to figure out the terminology, not just the terminology that we use to refer to it. Like, I will probably forevermore call it the fitness trainer role. But what the user will actually see will be different and will include these other roles: wellness, strength, conditioning, etc.
Can I
But
ask a
so-
quick question? Like under discipline, you have like dance, okay? So where I'm not a dancer, I mean, not as an adult, like, but let's say there's an adult dancing, you want to give people a home, right? You're looking to make UB Sports a home for people that maybe are homeless. So is there some kind of competitive dancing platform out there? Maybe there is, I don't know, but like, so you can put dance, we used to put dance, we've covered that category, that discipline. Then they're gonna fill in that they're like, I don't know, tango, competitors or whatever. They're going to fill that in manually themselves, right? You're not going to try and figure out what all the dancing, disciplines are, sub disciplines under dance. That's not
well,
our
that goes back to the question as to, one, is this list of disciplines complete? I personally have no idea. Okay. Maybe there's 5 types of dance that you could specifically list there.
Yeah, but I'm saying
Maybe
you don't
there's-
want to
maybe-
get it wrong. You can just put dance and they could fill it in themselves. Can't you do that? So like
Well, again, they're going to break that out. So ballroom dancing, spirit dancing,
yeah, but they do that. You don't have to do
cheerleading.
that. We don't have to do that. You can just put dance, and then they're going to be whatever communities come to this site that are dance oriented. They're going to fill in what they do. Maybe they're ballroom dancers. Maybe they're, I don't know. Maybe they're like group dancers, like a group like youth dance program or something. I don't know. There could be many different subcategories. We don't know them all. So I'm saying, shouldn't they fill that in themselves? We just
Yeah, that goes under John's TBD. I think we have to decide
Yeah.
that later. But let's go on with where
Yeah.
we are. We're getting tied down here.
Okay. Yeah. So the facility and resource names were free form, and there's a bunch of types. Every facility, every resource is a type. Like an alley would be like a bowling alley, batting cages. A course could be like a racetrack course or a track and field course or a ski slalom course. A court, a field, a gym, a pipe, if you think about skateboarding and snowboarding. A pool, a range, like for a shooting range. A ring, a rink, a table,
Track.
like for table tennis, track. There's probably more. That's why I have ETC in there. This, again, just like everything else, is incomplete. And the question, which was raised under the attributes, is, are we going to allow custom types to be entered? Frankly, I think we should be able to identify all the facility and resource types. But there are probably some one-off things out there. Somebody devises a specific thing for training or something, and you're not going to know what that's called.
Yeah, there's always going to be something there.
Would a ropes
So-
course fall under course? Ropes course, like just a. Have you guys heard of those? The ropes course?
Yeah.
Well, that could fall under course, or maybe you need it to be different.
Right.
So again, that just means how far do we want to flush this list out? It's not finalized now. It's probably missing some things. So we'd have to think through all the sports and what those facility and resource types are. And you also have to think that there's a ton of resources. Like if you think of a football team and all of the various pieces of equipment that I might have to manage, like who's using the tackling dummies, who's using the punting field today, who's using the field goal field today. So there's a ton of different types of resources that you could manage. If you're thinking of a weight room and you're managing all of the weightlifting equipment and the strength training equipment, you might have 20 bench presses or 40 treadmills. You know, so like, are you going to have a type as a treadmill, or are you going to call it gym equipment? So those are the kind of questions that are going to come up with types. So, you know, there's the question again about whether you allow custom types and what kind of process you have to integrate them back into your main list of types. So those are the data point values for the various data points. You can see how with the data point specs, it tells you kind of about that data point and how that data point is managed, the types of values that are going to show up under those data points. And then the last thing that you have is there are certain relationships between the data points. For example, based on the role you're on, and this I completed this morning, this tab. This is the relationships tab, which I told you guys to ignore on what I uploaded because it wasn't complete yet. So there's two things you need to know in the system for the system to function once for each of the roles. And that is, what table do we use for the sport or discipline? So for example, everyone but fitness trainer uses the sport table, which is the list of all your sports. The fitness trainer uses that list of disciplines. Okay. Now, if the disciplines are somehow merged in with the list of sports, you can simplify the configuration and therefore the programming required for each role. The other thing that you need to know about each role is, can a child profile use that role? And the only ones a child can use are fan and athlete.
Right.
Because I don't think that a child could be any of those other 9 roles. So that would be part of the system. So the system knows that if this profile is for a child, I'm only going to let them pick 1 roles. I'm not going to let them pick athletic director, for example. Okay. Then there's a relationship between the role and the level. And there's probably a relationship between the role, the level is probably dependent upon the combination of the role and the sport.
And the
Although
age.
I personally cannot think of any examples where the sport will distinguish the level that you're at. For example, an athlete might only be able to select from these levels, even though if we look at all the values under level, there's 25 of them. There's 25 levels here, roughly. But the athlete is only going to be able to pick 12 of them. Now, again, this is just kind of off the top of my head with what knowledge I do have, but this is by no means a complete and final list. But this is the way you need to think about it. When you're filling out an athlete profile for a child, you're only going to have those levels. And if you look at the above athlete, you'll notice that professional, semi-pro, and club pro are distinctly missing from the child athlete levels. Now, maybe that's not true. Maybe you can have someone who's 16 is considered a professional. You know, I don't know that offhand. It didn't seem logical to me, so I left it off. But in any case, an athletic director might only have these 4 levels, because you don't need to know if they're Division II, Division I necessarily, right? So you don't need to break that down. You don't even need to know if it's a junior college or a regular college or a university. You just need to know it's a college, maybe. High school youth. Maybe recreational would fit in there, or community. But you can see how when somebody says that they're an athletic director, the choices they have to pick a level for that sport is going to be restricted. It's not just going to be open to this entire list of all levels. And that's why earlier I said you're going to eliminate the ambiguity between saying college level versus Division I level, or college level and junior college level, which actually I have both listed here. You know, for the athletic director, I think it's more, where do they work? College level, high school level, etc. An athletic trainer might only have those levels. And maybe it doesn't even fit for youth or community. That's kind of overlapping. You know, that has to be flushed out also. As a coach, same thing. Here's the groups that you would have as a coach. A facility manager doesn't pick a sport or a level, right? That just doesn't apply to them. If you look at the data point specs, you'll see that for a facility manager, you know, those things are optional. A facility manager may not even pick them. So they don't really apply to a facility manager. A fan, here's your levels for a fan. Fitness trainer,
Wait, quick,
the
quick
sport and
question.
level doesn't apply.
Do we discuss, like, for facility manager, like, you could be,
You're muted. You're muted.
yeah, you could be a facility manager at, like, you know, the Equinox in New York City, or you could be a facility manager at Michigan, right? Totally different jobs. We're not distinguishing collegiate versus, you know, for-profit entity, right?
No, it's
Not
just a
as
matter
far
of
as the
what-
role.
Right.
Yeah, we're not distinguishing that. We don't care if you're doing it for profit, for a college, you know, it's your, you know, Joe's Fitness Center, you know, in Ohio, nobody cares. It's just a facility manager, and that's how we're categorizing that.
Yeah, I mean, you're asking them eventually for a name of an organization or a school, you know, so yeah, for a facility manager, I might type in the name of Equinox or University of Michigan or Joe's Gym, you know, whatever. We're not really deriving anything from that yet that I know of. You know, whether it's something that's important or you want to be able to distinguish that, then yeah, maybe that's something that we have to do, or maybe that's down the road. Or
Yeah,
whatever.
functionally, what we want to do is get them there and sign themselves, fill out, yeah, it's the rec center at Stony Brook, and we have 12 different areas that people can sign up for, and then we have to set up scheduling for it, and then we have to get the people in, and then we have to do the day-to-day scheduling of those things and allow the people to sign in and schedule themselves for where they want to be, volleyball courts or the badminton courts or whatever. And that's what we care about there. But that's the same thing as a gym. You know, exactly the same thing. This is the aerobics area. This is the strength area. This is the massage table 2. It's all the same thing. You can just write in or type in what you're talking about for both of those. So it's not really necessary to break it out and try to, you know, double pigeonhole them. They're already in their lane.
Yeah.
Right. So a league admin, there's the levels that I thought were associated to a league admin. Same for a recruiter, and same for a team manager. The parent, of course, it doesn't apply, because when you pick parent, you're really completing a child's profile, which is either going to be fan or athlete. So in going through that, like, when I pick my role and I pick a sport, I'm not so sure that the sport will help make a decision as to what levels are available for you to select from. Okay, I believe that when I say that I'm an athletic director, that's all I need to know to pick the level, that the level should be one of these. Like, it doesn't matter what sport. Maybe the athletic director, because they're kind of a comprehensive thing, is a bad example. But if I say I'm an athletic trainer at the college level, does it really matter what sport? I mean, I might want to know what sport, and I'm going to ask them what sport, but the sport doesn't change the choices that they have for what level. Does everybody get that?
Yes.
You could
Yep.
just flip it and put like that first, like trainer, and then the level, college, high school, youth, and then sport as an after a derivative of that.
Yeah, and the way I kind of have it in the diagrams is I'm going to ask the sport and the level at the same time.
Mhm.
You know, whether level is the first question or sport is the second, I guess, you know, is what's your preference, right? It doesn't really matter.
We'll leave it optional. Just
Um,
put the level, and then they can fill in the sport if they want to. I don't know if it's relevant for us.
Right, but the key thing is that I believe that it's really just the role that will
Yeah.
determine what levels we allow them to choose from, not the sport in that
Right.
case.
Right.
The next thing is for leagues. We are pre-populating a list of leagues. We have the data point values for the leagues or the divisions. Again, we have to figure out the custom option. Again, this is an incomplete list, but the sport and the level will determine what leagues to pre-populate. Okay, so if I say I play football on the professional level, those are the pre-populated leagues that I might be able to choose from. And to be honest, I never knew there were professional women's football teams,
Me neither.
but
Yeah.
there are.
I did. There's
There
two stories
are.
on it.
If I say that I play football in a semi-pro league, here's a bunch of leagues I found on the internet in Wikipedia, okay? If I say I play football in college, here's a bunch of leagues that I know of. Now, football, I might want to break down FBS, FCS for leagues because that's important in college football. But if I was playing baseball in college, it would just be NCAA Division I, Division II, Division III. I wouldn't break it down to FBS, FCS because that's purely a football breakdown. Football for junior community colleges. Here's a couple I found on Wikipedia. Here's a high school association. I don't know if all high schools are part of it or not, whatever. I did not go into looking up leagues for community, recreational, intramural, middle school, stuff like that. And here's like an amateur level women's football. I only did football. Obviously, we would have to do something similar for every sport at whatever level those sports are valid at. So obviously, those relationships are incomplete and would have to be completed. But this is what drives when you get a drop-down list of leagues to choose from. You're going to restrict that list immediately based on the sport and the level that they've already told you. And lastly, there's a relationship between the level and the type of team it is. Remember, team type, there was like 5 of them: pro, Olympic, school, club, community. Maybe there's more. Those are the ones that were in the documents that you guys created. I think they were only really valid in the team manager thing, but I think you can apply a team type to just about any type of team. So here's all of the levels that are in our system, and these are the types of teams that they are. Obviously, if you're a professional level, it's a professional team. Semi-pro level is going to be a professional team. So there's pretty clear relationship between the level you're at and the type of team it can be. Maybe amateur could be club or community. But I think if you pick amateur level, that's a very specific case where it's a club team. So those are the relationships between some of the data points. Once we know what all the data point values are, we can then build out the relationships. So that if I, for example, choose that I'm a college athlete, regardless of the sport, let's say football, I'm a college football athlete. When it comes time for me to put my team name in and the league, or my school name and the league, these are the choices for league that I'm going to have. I'm not going to have a list of all these other leagues to choose from. And because I said that I was at the college level, my team type will automatically be associated as a school team.
And is that where they will put the name of the school, or they would just the actual name of the school?
There's another field. There's another field. Like the team name will always be asked, but it's free form. Right.
Okay.
We're never going to give them a list. They're going to be able to tell us that. Then
Right.
they're going to say what league I'm in, and the team type will be derived already based on whatever level I said I was.
Okay.
Whether or not I enter a team name or a league division. Like, for example, an athlete, it's optional to ask them the team or the school or the organization that they play for, as well as the league or division they're in. That's optional. So if I don't give you that, I know that because I put in college, that I'm a college athlete, I know that the team type is going to be school,
Right.
even though I've never told you what team or league I'm in. So encompassing those three things, the specs for the data points, which are all the attributes, is it required or optional? You know, is it a select or free form field? The actual data point values that we have, the relationships between some of these data points. You can go back and you can look at the profile example that I created, which is like my own personal profile. This is what I would see if I filled out a UB Sports profile. So I'm an athlete for softball, skiing, and football.
Man.
I play on 5 different softball teams. I ski, but it's recreational. There is no team. I play football. It's pickup football. There is no team. I'm also a coach for a recreational softball team. This is where it might be, you know, maybe levels would need to be recreational adult versus recreational youth. Okay, so these are the types of examples that only by going through examples and walking through the data points can you determine, well, do we have all the appropriate levels? Like if somebody says they're a coach for a recreational team, should we really be asking them if it's recreational adult or recreational youth? Okay. So I'm a coach for a team. The league and division isn't in your system. So I either choose other, or I choose, you know, to put in a custom value, however we handle that. I'm a league administrator because I'm a commissioner of a softball league. It's recreational, it's an adult league. This is the name of the league, or the organization, really. That's how you would look at that. I'm also a fan of these various teams and or sports. So I'm an NFL football fan. I like the NFL in general. I follow the entire NFL. But I'm also specifically a fan of the Minnesota Vikings. I'm a fan of college football, which is my alma mater. I'm a fan of high school football, but only for my alma mater. In baseball, I'm a fan of the Braves. I really only follow the Braves. I don't follow the entire baseball league, etc. I'm a facility manager, and I control and manage these fields for softball and these 2 batting cages. And optionally, I said, this is the organization I'm a facility manager for. I'm also a parent of 2 children. And here's the relevant athlete data for my children. So you can see that if we wanted to build a profile for every role at every level, for every type of league, you would have a pretty exhaustive, lengthy list. But ultimately, that's what you would really need to determine whether we have the right values for each of these data points.
And then, John, visually, how does a person going to navigate this just visually? I'm thinking like someone looking on their phone, you're on the way to practice, you want to communicate with your team because it's raining outside and you can't play in your game today or something, and you're on your phone. So, or,
Well,
you know,
the design challenge of this for mobile, for like small form factor devices, is going to be a challenge, but that's a design element. So the way we do it on mobile may be different than on desktop. And we're not close yet to figuring out how that's going to work.
on desktop,
But
how do
for
you
example,
this looking like on desktop? You're at home getting ready.
I'll show you that. The first thing I'm going to do is go back to the data point specs, and I'm going to say what roles are visible in this list or should be not visible. And I'm going to take out the options where it says not visible. So level, team type, resource type, and recruitable. So let me hide this, hide this, hide this.
Also, you know, just to comment on your point, I think you're right. If you say you play rec as a child, you're thinking recreational, like town government recreational, like the rec league of the town. So maybe for children, you'd say town/recreational, which is a recreational league, but organized by the town. And for an adult, recreational means like you just do it for fun with your buddies. You know, there are 2 different meanings.
Yeah, I mean, that's why there's overlap, like between the different documents. Like Leslie, you and Daynia created those documents for the various roles and the questions you would ask. And there needs to be some consolidation of that, like all the data from each of those into this list, which is what it is. And that's why there's some, what I call overlap. Whereas you have recreational, community, city, town team, a church or parish team. And then there was like an option that was like,
I think recreational could be like for an adult has a different meaning. Like I play rec, like rec means like recreational is almost like a verb, you know, but recreation is a league by a town for a child, right? So that has double meanings. That's something that, but I would keep the others safe. Like you could put community, and underneath that you could put rec or parish, or you know, maybe town recreation, town, you know, but community could be parish and rec, but not town, right? Because I mean, sorry, parish and a separate league, but
yes,
the town
and
would be,
the way, yes, and the way that we would do that, like you could put community and recreational in the same list, and one person is going to choose community, another person's going to choose recreational, but maybe they play on the exact same team. Okay, so it's a matter of what do those words mean to the users. More importantly, it may not matter to the user, and it may not matter to us that 2 people that play on the same team, one picks recreational and one picks community. Okay. The real question is, how are we going to use that data to market to that person, to display information to that person? Like if you want to communicate something to all recreational players, then it's important that two people on the same team don't pick different things. Like one picks community and one picks recreational. So it's really a matter of how are we going to use it in the long term? And, you know, is it going to make sense? Like if I had a drop-down list where community, adult, and recreational were all in the same list, what would I choose? Might depend on my mood. One day I might choose one, another day I might choose another. Right? So your point's very valid. And this is why we need to comb through these values, because these have to be built into the database and into the system so that we have them. But going back to how we envision this profile page, I've hidden the column. So I'm looking at it when I go in, I'm going to have these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 columns. And that's what I'm going to see. Chances are that's not going to fit on my phone. Okay. On a phone, you might have a different paradigm where you list the 7 roles. So if I want to edit one of my athlete roles, I click athlete first. And then I get a page that shows me the sports and the teams that I'm on. Or if I'm a facility manager or a fan, you know, I'm just going to pick which role do I want to edit. So I'll click athlete and see those items on the next screen on my phone. So mobile may be very different than what you see on a desktop. On a desktop computer, I envision a grid, something like what we're looking at now. And over here on the right-hand side are going to be some buttons or links or something that says, you know, edit this one. Each row will have a button that says edit, delete. And somewhere at the top of the page, there'll be a button, add a new one. Or maybe it's at the bottom, there's an empty row for you to start adding at the bottom. Right? So I could come in and say, oh, I want to add a new role. Well, I'm an athlete and I just learned to do rowing. So I add a new one and it's just a new line item. So that's how I envision it on a desktop. It's going to look very much like this. On mobile, you're going to have like a tiered progression where the first thing I'll do is I'll say, you know, I want to edit my athlete role. Or maybe I even say so much on one screen, I say, I want to edit my athlete softball profile. Or I want to edit my athlete skiing profile. Or I want to edit my fan football profile. And then it takes me to another screen on my phone or tablet. And at that point, I would continue to be able to edit stuff, the rest of the data.
John, do you think they're going to need, people are going to want to do this when they try to join our website? There's a lot of work to do for you to get on it just to see what's going on.
I'm sorry, can you repeat your question?
Yeah, every person who wants to join our website, whether it be team or athlete, whatever it might be, to fill out all this information. That's a very long time to do all that stuff. It takes a lot of time and effort to get it all together. I don't know if a lot of people would want to do that if they're joining the website. Like, I can't deal with this crap.
They're not going to be forced. They're not going to be forced to do it. So when you first sign up, you give us your email and a password. The system will send you an email to verify your email address is correct. You'll click a link in that, which will take you back to the site. It'll mark your database account as being active and verified. And at that point, it will say, you know, we'll know that they don't have a profile because there'll be no records in the database, right? They haven't done any roles or anything on their profile. Well, actually, the first thing that they'll do is they'll get a screen that says, okay, now tell us, now that you're verified, thank you. Give us your name, give us your zip code, give us your date of birth, and a couple other mandatory things that we ask them. I think we're also optionally asking them for like their favorite sport or something like that. And then when they submit that, we're going to say, do you wish to start your profile now? So the user will be given a choice to begin this process. Or they might choose no, at which point they just go to the homepage. And they can just start browsing and joining groups or inviting friends or sending friend requests or whatever they want to do.
Oh,
So they're
good.
not
That way they have the
forced.
option to get, yeah, good. That's the option. That's good. I like that.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, you can't force them through this because you'll never get anybody to complete the process.
Right.
And we're gonna, John, we're planning to incorporate some kind of like the chatting ability, right, between communities. That's obviously part of it, you know, sharing information, sharing pictures, but the chatting and that kind of group messaging is gonna be part of all this, right?
Yeah, I'm not so sure about chat and what specifically is in the spec for chat.
I mean, like not maybe not chat, like, you know, but like messaging the group, like that's the whole point of this, is to take these groups and communicate and make them into little sub communities, right? So like your team wants to tell you.
Yeah, messaging is in it. Messaging is definitely in it. So that's what I have with regard to these things. This was all derived based on the flow charts, which was derived based on the documents that you guys have already created.
Right.
Again, most importantly is it became painfully obvious how incomplete the data point values are, how we want to handle some of the data points. You know, do we want to require it, make it optional? You know, that kind of thing.
Couldn't you have all these ambassadors, however many we have and however many sports that we have them flesh out these things? Like maybe that the woman that we met, the Olympian, she could do all the running stuff, and all the running groups there are, you know, in the country. And then, you know, someone else who's doing a skier could, you know, do all the skiing, you know, groups.
Yeah, that's the idea, Les.
Yeah, you could just engage them now.
What do you mean? Like what would someone like that flush out?
Like a lacrosse player, you want to know all the leagues, semi-pro leagues in Europe. I don't know what those are. Like you'd have to just Google them. Maybe the person who plays a sport knows all that, and they have their ear to the ground with whatever sport they do. And if they're an ambassador, maybe that's their, you know, contribution to try and, like, you know, flush out. They might know, you know, more about all these potential leagues than someone else that doesn't play the sport, right?
I think the ambassador should only be responsible for
Content.
creating.
I know.
No, not content. Remember that form you had, John, where you did it for football, and you said each sport needs to have the same. Go back to that. I think it was a profile example.
Yeah, all those different.
No, not that one. The one with just football.
All the leagues within football, like the pro leagues and the.
Yeah, that right there. The relationship between the sport level and the league. Wouldn't you said each sport would have to create something like that? So I would assume the ambassadors should be responsible for creating.
Yeah, that's
this
what I'm
for
saying.
their
We should
sport.
engage them now, so they can start, you know, kind of making a framework for the sports that we do have ambassadors for, and then the rest we'll have to fill in ourselves. But
Yeah, I mean, if
Along- you're
a
right,
lot of
along
work.
with
I mean, how many
everything else.
sports you doing? I mean, even like the top 10 sports, that's a lot of work, and maybe we'd miss them if we don't know the sport well.
Yeah.
well,
There's a lot of
you know,
work
for
to
that
talk
matter,
about.
Greg says that we have 100 sports or something like that already in the system.
Ambassadors, do we have, you know?
Yes, it is.
So we don't have ambassadors for all those sports.
I didn't know if I could wait on Carlos. Yeah.
And it may not be worthwhile to go through the effort to put those leagues in. Remember, the
On my
question
app.
exists as to whether we're going to allow custom entries. And if you allow custom entries, your user base is going to populate that list for you.
Yeah, but maybe that's the big
So-
sport, you know, like, you know, things, the top 10. You know,
Sure.
not for fencing, you know, but maybe for softball and soccer and football, baseball, basketball, lacrosse, whatever track.
Yeah, I mean, if those resources are out, somebody's got to work on it.
I don't know who the ambassadors are. We could get a list and see who's who and who we could engage, and then see where what holes we're going to have in those top 10 sports or whatever, how many sports you want to target.
Yeah, Greg is gonna have to decide how we move forward with this
Yeah.
because there's, like Leslie said, there's a lot of work to be done.
Overwhelming.
Yeah, and even the data points and deciding what we want in those categories. We touched upon it. We had some discussion, but like you said, John, it's going to take more than just a couple of comments to figure out what we want to do.
Right.
But that being said, we have to kind of attack this the best way possible.
Yeah, and
So
I think the best way to progress through this is to look at the data points themselves. We need to answer the question as to whether we're allowing custom values, which will spin off ultimately into separate conversations on how to handle and process those custom entries. I don't want to dwell on that piece, but we need to determine the custom value questions, and we need to finalize what's required and optional for the various roles. Okay. The next best thing is to try to look at the relationships and make sure that we have these relationships flushed out. Like, are these the appropriate levels for an athlete? Are these the appropriate levels for a child athlete? Are these the appropriate levels for a director, et cetera, and go through these relationships.
Right.
Once we understand how we're building that, then we can come back and finalize, what sports do this. The method to think about the actual values is, what do we want in the system to start with when we launch? What do we want ultimately long-term? And 3, how do we process custom values if we're allowing custom values? But we need to flush out the sport list, the levels that they play, and you can't really completely build the level list until you understand the relationships between the roles and the levels. Like, what are those relationships that you're going to have there? Of course, the leagues and divisions, there was some commentary earlier that we wouldn't need to list these conferences like Big 10, Big East, Big 12, PAC, SEC, ACC, et cetera. Maybe we don't need individual divisions, et cetera, for NCAA.
I think we do need
So-
Division 1, 2, and 3, though.
Yeah.
Perhaps.
So
And I think for football, it's important to break out FBS and FCS when you're talking about college football, right? So, that needs to be flushed out, the disciplines and the facility types or resource types.
So the data points we want to figure out whether we want to add the customized value, and if so, how do we do that? Finalize the required versus optional data for the relationships. Are those appropriate? Are those the appropriate levels for the roles? And the third one was, what sports do we want to start with, and what's long-term sports, and how do we process the custom values for the sports?
Correct.
And there was one more thing. You went back to the data points and said something about the data points that I missed. Yeah. What was the last thing with those?
The facility and resource types.
I would suggest, John, that in Slack, you go in and kind of put, because I just jotted it down, but I would like in Slack to know that these are the 3 or 4 things we have to figure out you know, and then maybe give everyone an opportunity to dive into each one and give their, you know, their opinion of it or their hierarchy of it or what's necessary and not necessary and how they would recommend the custom value, how we kind of break those things down. And then maybe on our next call, discuss it that way, giving each person an opportunity to give their take on how best to approach each one of these things.
Yeah, and like as an example, if we look at the levels that we have, the way that this list will be created will be by going to the relationship where you have the role and the level. And I'm still pretty fairly convinced that the sport itself will not have any factor on what level it is, or what level you make available. So if you say the athlete should be these levels and we add or take away whatever, we come up with what are the levels that an athlete plays at, okay? And you'll have that list. And then you'll say, what are the levels that an athletic director has? And I have that list. And then this whole column becomes this.
Exactly, right,
Where these are all your possible levels.
right.
Now, in an ideal world, if I say that I'm a college athlete, that terminology is going to match up with college for athletic director and
Mhm.
college for athletic trainer,
Mhm.
right? So if we can focus on breaking out this list,
The relationships.
that will drive what fits in this column and
Right.
what goes in the database.
Right.
Okay, so for example, college as a level may be used by more than one role,
Right.
but not by every role.
Mhm.
Okay, so that's how these lists will be built.
So would you
So-
think, so do you think you can put those tasks in
Yeah, I
a,
can update Slack today.
in just like a
Yeah, I can
succinct,
do
like,
that today.
these are the 4 things we need to discuss, fix, you know, come to some sort of conclusion, so that way we have
Yep.
better,
Yeah.
you know, better,
Yeah, and I'll put the most recent version of this spreadsheet up too, so you can see it.
now in terms of
Yeah,
our
because-
feedback,
That too, thank you, yeah.
in terms of our feedback, what's beneficial for you and for Greg to get an idea of what our thoughts are? Should we just be ready to discuss it? Should we write it down? Like what, you know, I want to be very, you know, in terms of our next, in terms of time.
Very
be-
efficient, yes.
I will
Yeah,
tell
very-
you, I will tell you what won't be helpful first. What won't be helpful is for each of you to download a copy of this spreadsheet and each of you add a couple things here, add a couple things here, add a couple things here. I don't want to have to go through 3 or 4 different spreadsheets to try to identify what has changed.
Okay.
That's not going to be helpful.
Why don't we do like teams, like have
Oh,
two,
well, what's going to be helpful, John? Let him, because he's got an idea.
I mean, if we look at this, you could come back and say, okay, for athlete, we should get rid of Olympic, we should get rid of high school, and we should add X, Y, and Z. Okay, that would be helpful to specifically identify what you want to add, what you want to remove, and what you want to take out. So for athlete, I want to add these things. For athlete, I want to delete these things. And for athlete, I want to change this terminology. And you do that for each of the roles. Now, maybe the roles are split up between different people, you know, whatever. But that's
Well,
going
we
to be more helpful, is to say, here's the changes that I want to see for this.
Right.
That's
Well,
going to be
we
the
can also
most helpful.
I've done this a lot. I copy and pasted a copy of the whole thing myself, made my own version. And I color coded what I wanted to do. So I kept things separate from the original.
As
Well,
long as it's
Well,
as long as it's easy for me to identify what has changed, But for example, if I were to make a change and say I'm going to add athlete,
Yeah, but I would change it to different colors so you know I added that.
right? If I do this and then send it back to me, there's nothing that calls me out that that's what's new. So I have to like interrogate and read this entire list to go back and say, oh, this is the new thing. That's time consuming. I can do it, but it certainly takes a lot longer to do it. It's not as easy as identifying. So yes, if you add them in and color code them, to Bill's point, that's helpful because I go in, I look at the colors. Oh, these are new.
Well,
The
would it
green
be,
ones are new. The
would it be
red ones
better
I
for
have to
each,
delete.
Correct.
would it be better for each one of us? Because you might get 3 different documents with 3 different color coding
Oh,
for
we do
different
that. Green,
things.
green is the addition, red is delete. And if we do all the same way,
Yeah, but I might have different editions than
okay,
your
but you-
editions, though.
make a copy of what John has.
I would say, I would recommend that, you know, we all, when we did, first of all, identified the roles, we broke it up. Leslie did parent, and what else did you do? Parent, and so I'm saying, what if we take those same roles and kind of break down and dissect what's already been presented through your stuff and edit that or change or leave the same based on what, because I did athlete, coach, and professional, which would be athletic trainer. What if we just broke and Leslie took parent? What else did you have
2.
besides
I
parent?
think team manager.
Yeah.
Yes. So what if we, between Bill, Leslie, and myself, take a role and really go through it and decide what we want to keep and change instead of having to do. You're gonna get 3
Wanna
different opinions
overlap,
on
or
the
maybe we
same
have
thing.
teams.
Yeah.
Yeah, either teams or Daynia like assigning what we already kind of focused on.
Well,
Yeah, because I
David,
have a better idea of
yeah,
my
why don't you
athlete.
two talk about what you want to
coach.
do and let me know what's left there and I'll take care of the other part. All right, let me know, okay?
Yeah.
Put it in Slack or a message me, whatever you want. Just let me know what you guys, because you guys worked a lot on this already and you have a good grasp on your particular fields. So let you guys decide what you want to do.
Yeah.
Let me know what it is.
I think the only 3 roles that weren't covered were fitness trainer, athletic trainer, and facility manager. Those were the ones that weren't.
Did some too. What did Kelly do? I can't remember what she did. Didn't she
So
do?
Bill, you could take those 3 if you want.
I'll do those 3.
Yeah, I mean, a fitness trainer doesn't really have a level, right? I mean,
It has somewhat of a level.
at least not in any.
You know, you have youth gear, you have adult gear. You know, each sport is a little different. Soccer has different setup than a high school soccer. There's a little more safety features, but not much. You're right. It's really not much of a difference,
Okay.
though.
Okay, so maybe there is a level for you know, trainer wellness and yoga people or something, strength and conditioning coaches,
Yeah,
whatever
and
they
we're
are.
calling this fitness, wellness, and
Fitness
Strength and
training /
conditioning.
wellness instructor.
wellness instructor, right?
Leslie, you had
And I think,
parent and what
and I think
else?
strength and conditioning.
Right, that's it.
Leslie, you had parent and what else?
I think I did I do teams?
So what
You
would be
did
the
team
team
manager.
Team, is that on there? Is that a role that's on there? Or did we break that one
Yeah,
up?
they're in.
Just to go back.
Okay, team. So parent and team managers, Leslie. What else is left? I took coach, athlete, and athletic director. And I got league
Yeah, I
admin
mean,
as well.
Here's your roles.
I lost it there. Fitness.
I have the first, I have athlete,
Facility.
athletic director, and league admin.
And you had recruiter too, didn't you?
Yes, but that's not on there.
Here it is, number 11.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
So I'm doing the
Yeah, they're all on there.
trainer facility. Well, team manager.
No,
What was the other one you had? It was the 3 you had told me. Facility manager.
Oh, maybe it was fan. I think it was fan.
Fan. That was the 3rd one.
Did Kelly do some? Which ones did Kelly do? She had a couple.
She didn't do any, not that I've seen.
yeah, she didn't really do much.
Okay, I wasn't sure.
What was it? So fitness trainer, wellness instructor, and strength and conditioning coach, right?
Yeah.
Well, the three I have me as a fitness wellness instructor, facility manager, and fan. Want me to take care of, right?
And what she's saying is strength and fit, the strength trainer is part of that triple.
Yeah.
Yes. It's
Strength
fitness
and-
wellness instructor slash strength and
So I have 10 down on this list, John. I miss, right? Is there 10?
There's 11.
11.
Okay, I'm missing one.
Leslie did parent and like team club manager.
Right.
Right.
And the ones that you did, Daynia, were athlete, coach, recruiter, and what you called administration,
Which is like
which
league.
was basically league admin and athletic director.
Okay. And then we have, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I still have 10, but I think,
Well, nobody did one for fan.
yeah, I have that down on my list for Bill.
right. Yeah.
Oh, athletic trainer. I think,
Well, parent.
no, it's athletic
because a
trainer.
parent
Greg did athletic trainer. Greg, didn't you do athletic trainer?
I thought I did, yeah.
So yeah, so
No, well, yeah, athletic trainer was in his document, I think, but he did a few different things in his document.
yeah, but I'm for the sake of going back and kind of revisiting what you put together and cleaning up tying up the loose ends and all that stuff. Somebody needs to take athletic trainer.
I'll take it.
That's number 11, right?
Okay, all right, John, so all the roles are covered. Do you want to assign them in Slack?
I didn't keep a list. I mean,
I have it right
No
here.
problem. I'll take it from there. Dang
yeah, I mean, you can update it once I post this document.
Okay, I'll do that.
John, we have the most recent version of this, right? On the
What's
email,
that?
right? We have the most recent version of this spreadsheet on email, right? On Excel. You gave
I'm sorry, I'm getting a lot of feedback from somewhere.
Yeah. You gave us the most recent, this Excel spreadsheet, you gave this to us via email. This is all updated, what you sent us the other day, right?
Not yet, no, because I finished the relationships, what we're looking at now. I finished that this morning, so I have to post this yet.
Okay.
John, how soon? I mean, by next Monday's call, is that it? Is that enough, or do you want it sooner?
I mean, if you finish it sooner, yeah, put it in Slack or email me or something, and I'd rather deal with it sooner rather than later.
We have a developer call Wednesday morning. Why don't we try to get it done before 9:30 on Wednesday?
This isn't going to be even ready to give them yet. Greg.
Okay.
Okay, so is that a good enough handle on it moving in terms of progress, John?
I think so. I mean,
Greg?
the key thing for me was to make sure you guys kind of understood how it has to be built from a technical perspective. And, mostly the relationships between some of the fields and what the actual values are that we're going to give people to select from. Like we have a few documents and a few examples of what we're thinking, but you can't really have a complete thorough list unless you have this visualization, which I tried to give you today. So now that you have that, I feel that if everybody's level set, we can get, the right values that we need, a picture of the functionality we need. I kind of thought the level was more complex because I thought the role in the sport were going to drive that, but it really seems like the sport is irrelevant.
Mm-hmm.
It's the role that you play as to what level you're going to choose. So once we can, collectively put our brains on this, we'll come up with a thorough, complete list. I can't do it.
If we
myself,
decide,
certainly, you know, so.
if we decide that custom value is necessary for some of the data points, should we decide how that's going to roll out? Or should we leave that up to you and the developers?
Well, I think we can discuss a vision of how it'll work for the user. Like we can try to talk about it. Like I gave that example of the Amazon search box where you start typing and it'll give you like a refined list. It doesn't give you all 1,000 things in the database that you have to scroll through to find your thing. You know,
Right.
that's awkward and not user friendly. So there's technology that can be built in, and how it actually ends up looking on the screen is, from my perspective, irrelevant. We
Okay,
can make it look as cool or as ugly or whatever we want it to look like.
okay,
So it's the functionality and understanding how a user is going to progress through this and what their experience is going to be. So we can have a vision of what we expect, and from there we can communicate that expectation as a requirement to
okay,
the developers. You know,
Okay.
and that's why I constantly beat Greg up when he says, "Oh, we could have radio buttons or a drop down." I'm like, let's not look at it that way.
Right.
You know, let's let the developers figure out the right
right,
way to do it. We just need it to work a certain way, right? And they'll find the coolest, most modern implementation, and then we just have to verify that it's what we want.
My little concern, John, with all that is I'm worried about them not giving us enough flexibility to expand upon it at another date. Because what we're doing nice for phase one and maybe mostly phase two as well. But if they say, well, we have so long, we need to do something else or add more to our pages. How much time is it going to take? Assuming that they got to rebuild everything, or they can just
Well,
do that.
But like it was from
Or
like.
they can only build what we tell them to build, you know, and they could guess at what we might need in the future. And the way to make that most accurate would be to communicate what we think we might be doing in the future. So for example, when they go to build out this profile, they know that we're coming with a recruiting module in a future phase for the recruiting app. They know that we're going to be doing resource scheduling in a future phase. So for a facility manager, they should know to build some things to prepare for those eventualities. But if we don't communicate something to them, they're not going to have any preparation ready. As far as expansion goes, when we want to expand the system and do different things, like if we need to add new roles, the role kind of drives a process. Like what other things do you see? So that would have to be something that would require programming changes. But if you're going to add new sports or you're going to add new levels, that's done through an admin panel. So you could log in and it knows, oh, Bill Clark, he's an admin. I'm going to let him add tennis and golf and horseshoes. And you just add them to the list and they start to show up.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay, good.
okay,
So there is an administrative way to manage some of the key data values. And you would even be able to say, well, I'm going to add horseshoes. And the only level, you might even do the relationship. So you would add in the admin panel, you say, I want to add as an athlete horseshoes. So you're going to make sure that horseshoes is in as a level, and then you're going to define that relationship and say only an athlete can pick it. Right? That's an example of how the admin tool would eventually work, is we would be able to control those relationships between the data.
Okay, yeah, and it's not a real structural change of the program, right? That makes sense.
Correct.
all right. So besides the charts and all the information, you'll also put the 4 things that we need to consider, right, John?
Yeah,
Okay, and I'll upload who's doing what in terms of the roles for everyone as well.
Good, I appreciate that. I wrote it down, but I'll check with you as we confirm, that's all.
Okay, cool.
Thank
Okay, that's it.
Yeah,
And I mean, like you said, John, as soon as you can, I know everyone's busy, but as soon as we can, help them out. As soon as this stuff is up, we'll get to it and help you out, John.
yep, fast as we could.
yeah, and I don't care if I don't care if you email it or put it in Slack.
You have the card from the first dose.
I think it might get a little actually confusing if everybody puts their own individual things in Slack. Because then I have to filter through other messages to try to find who put what where. So it might be easier just to send me an email with,
Okay,
here's my changes
okay,
and here's my feedback, stuff like that.
okay.
And then hopefully we should be able to regroup as a team.
Had both of them on there, so anyone.
If we could get some of it done by the end of the week and we can meet Friday briefly to kind of talk about it, that's fine. Otherwise, next Monday's good. It's really up to you guys. I'll kind of handle it as I get it. So if everybody's kind of provided their feedback and input by Wednesday, we could talk Thursday. If you guys can't get to it and can't do it, then Monday's fine.
Yeah, Friday's good for me. I can do Friday.
Friday's good for me as well.
Me too.
What time you want to do, guys? Like noon?
Doesn't matter.
Yeah, that's good for me.
I like
Noon.
afternoon. Anything after the afternoon is good. Friday.
Okay. John, what's good for you?
Friday, I may be driving Friday, so I'm not sure. I'll have to loop back with you, Greg.
All right.
All right,
So let's
look-
put on hold till John, you get back to me.
Yeah, I'm gonna be driving out to Long Island either Thursday or Friday, but we're supposed to get a pretty good rainstorm Thursday, so I don't know if I'm driving Thursday or Friday. I'll have to loop back to you guys.
Okay,
No problem.
sounds good.
Okay.
That's good.
Great.
Thanks, everybody. This is a
work,
great
John.
meeting.
Thank you,
Thank you.
John. Thank you for making this all make
Yeah,
sense.
John, you kick butt. Thank you.
Cool.
Bye. Thank
All
you.
right,
Yeah, now.
bye.